Hey, open your eyes, you're losing control. Open your eyes, put down the phone. Conditioned by misinformation, it's just the media telling us lies. There's lots of fiction from the truth. Society's slow and tragic demise. Open your eyes, you're losing control. Open your eyes, put down the phone. Everyone's got their fucking opinion.
What's happening? Yes, this is the 350th episode of the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live. Yo, first, right out of the gate, I just want to thank everybody for the support around the world from the last couple of years. It's been a great run, and I really appreciate it. It wasn't part of my overall plan, but I'm sure happy the way that things turned out, and I've really enjoyed it, and I know that some of you have as well. What's up, Sean Brennan? What's up? What's up, Victoria? Ray Hogan up in Connecticut. Yo, we got a little Connecticut theme going today. We're going to talk a little Connecticut. All you con men and women up there. Yo, London represented. We got a little London connection too going today. Don't be scared. Thank you, Darren. Yep. 350th show. All right. Nola in the house. Good. Is that a new guitar behind me? It's actually a guitar I bought for Rochelle, but since I'm playing guitar in this thing that's coming up, I've been using it beating on her guitar. Yeah, it's like a cheapy Ibanez, but it's cool. It sounds good. You know, cheap guitars sound good these days for the most part. That's it. Krakow, Poland in the house. I like that. Shouting out all my brothers and sisters in Poland. Hell yeah. Good. Manchester, New Hampshire. All right, good. Listen, once again, 350th show. It's been great. It will continue to be great. You know, I'm not going to get too awash in nostalgia today. I'm just excited that I'm here doing the show with you. And thank you, Evan. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the kind words from everybody. I really do. So that said, Sean Daly, what's up? Listen, let's get the show on the road here. Let's bring on our first victim. Hey, what's up?
What's up? Greetings from Comac.
Greetings from Comac, Long Island, representing
Straight out of Comac.
Straight out of Comac. Good.
What's happening?
What's that? What's that on the couch? Is that a blanket? A Marvel Comics blanket?
Oh yeah, I pulled this out for the winter. I try to keep it hidden because the cat goes a little crazy on it. But it's this beautiful blanket I got with all these vintage comics on it.
Cool.
And
good.
I just don't want the cat chewing it to pieces, so
listen.
Busted
you
out.
You know what cats do? I've been around cats my whole life. Cats do a couple of things. First and foremost, they puke. Cats puke. They're pukers. They're just career pukers, and they chew shit up.
They chew and they puke.
They scratch, but they puke. They puke too. They're pukers. You know,
career pukers sounds like a Sunday matinee band from the early '80s.
We're a career puker. You know,
CP.
So that said, let's just cut right to it. You were at a big event the other night, right?
Yes, it was.
You were at Manowar at the King's Theater in Brooklyn, huh?
You know what? I couldn't resist. It was the only American show, and I haven't seen them in probably 15 years. And sold out in one of the most beautiful rooms in New York.
It's a beautiful venue.
Stunning.
It's a beautiful venue, yeah.
No opening band.
Hey, Manowar don't need an opening band.
And picture 1,000 guys like this.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, I was online and I was the only person not speaking French. Like the entire line.
Wait, is that right? Lori Dawn says there was a guy waiting online outside in a loincloth.
Oh, yes. He was wearing just a loincloth. It was 30 degrees. He was just wearing a loincloth and like 2 crossed leather straps for 2 hours and didn't budge. He was from Sweden.
Yeah, who could open for Manowar? Like, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it was.
I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that gig. I think that's even worse than opening for Slayer. Like, ugh.
It really was a lot of fun. I mean, doors were up at 6:30, but they didn't go on till like 8:40. So,
right
there they are. And these guys. I think he's 74, 75. He still sounds great.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping Ross the Boss would pop up, but it was not to be.
I don't think that's happening.
But yeah, I saw some of our friends. I saw Freeman Little there, and I saw it was
what's the dude's name that sings for Manowar?
Eric Adams, not to
right, same guy. He's been with them a long time, right?
Yeah, he's the original singer. I mean, it's Eric and Joey are the original two, the bass player, and they've gone through a number of guitar players and drummers over the years.
Right, and here's Joey DeMaio, right?
Yeah,
there
I think it's DeMaio.
DeMaio.
Yes,
and like what? I know he like technically plays bass, but it sure as hell doesn't sound like a bass.
Well, that's something called a piccolo bass, is what he was saying.
Okay, a piccolo bass. Oh, there you go.
And it's got a really thin neck, if you notice. It's like, but they were. I mean, it was a blast, and you see so many like hardcore dudes that are closet metalheads just like losing their minds.
Did you see our old drummer Matt Gray there?
I was texting with Matt. He was right. He was behind me by the soundboard.
Of course he was.
Yeah, Matt's in fact, Matt has a great vintage Manowar shirt. I have pictures of when he was in the band.
I'm looking for, I hung with Manowar back in the day. Let me see. Oh yeah. So where's my shot of? I'm looking for my great Manowar shot. Hold on, of me and the Biohazard guys and Manowar.
Oh my God, there's a super group right there.
All right, here it is. Listen, let me give you some background on this. So when I was out with Biohazard in the 90s, right? As a lot of people know, like in Europe, these festivals, especially back in the 90s, it'd be like a real mixed bag. Like I was out with Biohazard and like we'd be like, who's on this festival? We'd be like, what? David Bowie, the Fun-Loving Criminals, and Jesus and Mary Chain. And we'd be like, oh fuck yeah, So we're doing this thing. I think I was tour managing at the time, and we're doing this thing in France, and Manowar is on the bill. And we were like, oh hell yeah. So here's me, Evan Seinfeld, Robert Cheveria, and the Manowar guys in France.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then of course I took a bunch of pictures, here, they do their thing where they drive the motorcycles up onto the stage and the whole bit, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That. That's the original drummer, that's Scott Columbus. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Really nice guys. It was really, really.
I think their first album was 1982, I believe.
Yeah, they've been around for a minute, right? There you go. I took these shots.
Oh, these are great.
And look, if you look in the back, I just noticed this for the first time. If you look on the other side of the stage, you see Danny Schuler, the drummer for Biohazard, and Billy behind him watching the band.
Oh, that's funny. Look at that.
Yeah. So there you go. So a little bit of Manowar for you. Oh wait, one last one. Here's the dude right here. Right? Boom.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
He's in mid noodle.
Yeah, right. Yep. So there you go.
It was the one thing I have to say was that they did not do Battle Hymn, which is like their, the big one, which they usually close with. And, it was a great show, but I could have done without a little less noodling and one or two more songs, You're
lucky. Listen, sniveling fake metal person, you're lucky you got any man of war at all.
That's right. Death to false metal.
Death to false metal. Go back to Comac.
Actually, I'm heading back right into the city right after this because I'm heading up to the Jesse Malin benefit.
Yo, yeah, yeah.
So, got to represent
right in my neighborhood. I got, yeah, it's right in the
I'm gonna
neighborhood. I might go to the
window
after party.
But yeah, I mean, listen, 350 episodes, not too bad, not too shabby.
You know what's really spooking me about this whole thing? That in 18 episodes, 14 more episodes, right? It'll be 364, episodes. That'll mean a year of our lives have been spent doing this show, waking up and going, today's a year.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, and it's been a blast. I literally remember the phone call when you're like, I'm thinking about doing this thing, when the lockdown hit, and we're all glad you did.
Started it from my dad's kitchen in Florida.
Yep.
Live from Arnie Stone's kitchen.
with the petrified lizard.
Yeah. I got him somewhere. He's around somewhere. All right, bro. Well, hey.
And we got a great guest today. So this is
I couldn't have done it without you, bro. Thank you for all your help. You're a big part of what makes the show great. So thank you for your
been an honor. And you know what? Thank you. Thank you for show me your hammers.
Right.
So
okay, cool.
Anyway, so I'll throw a rock at your window when I get into the city later.
Yeah. I might go. I don't know. There's an after show party thing. I might go, but I don't know.
I can't do the after show party. It's a school night.
Fucking soft. Death to false metal.
I gotta get 2 hours sleep.
Yeah. Soft. All right. I'll talk to you later. Well, there you have it. The hardcore shutterbug, Stephen Messina. This is the one, the only, often imitated, never duplicated New York Hardcore Chronicles Live. We are sponsored by the Texas Silver Rush, DTFM Vinyl Distro, Generation Records, Vintage, Mad Vintage, and 126 Hardcore Clothing. They're a streetwear brand for restless individuals who don't compromise. They're about being positive, spontaneous, and true to yourself. For years, they experimented with several printing methods and materials and collaborated with a large number of designers and illustrators, always giving room for fresh perspectives while retaining the hardcore attitude. Get in touch with them. Ramp up your game at www.126clothing.com. That said, let me bring on my co-host today. You know him. You love him. He's been on many times. He's my clutch color commentary when need be. Hailing from New Hampshire, we're talking about Joel Gustin. What's up?
Hey, Drew. How are you?
Good. How's things in New Hampshire?
Actually, not too bad. The weather's been really beautiful lately, which is kind of shocking considering the date on the calendar. So I'll take it for as long as it gives it to us because usually we're buried under like 5 feet of snow by now. So,
it doesn't snow in New York City anymore. It used to snow. It like never snows here anymore.
Yeah. That's because the world's on fire, but that's another conversation for another time.
Yeah,
but
listen, I remember like snowstorms in New York City, and like it hasn't snowed here in a couple of years. So that said, what else? Congrats, Drew and crew. Thanks for keeping us entertained and to see some of our best musicians around. Cheers. I'm glad that I'm glad I've provided some form of entertainment. I'm an entertainer,
Hey, Drew, I meant to tell you last week's episode with DMC was beautiful, man.
It was great. Fantastic. It was good. Yeah.
Really enjoyed it.
DMC's cool. And we had some great moments there. I have a history with Run DMC. I produced music videos and, records, they gave me a gold record for the thing I produced for them, which was very kind. And I was sort of, between Def Jam and, there was a lot of, tentacles, we did the Onyx videos we did, and that's tied in with this and that. And,
Yeah, it was great. I love that he was talking about Tom Waits and Motorhead,
Isn't that wild? Right.
Well, I mean, that's what's beautiful about this whole thing. I mean, we're about to have a conversation like that, I'm sure, where it's just
Yeah.
going to go where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But we're all just music people. People get wrapped up on genre and scene. No, man, we're all just these geeky people who love what we love.
Music is the tie that binds us together, and
Absolutely.
it's the universal language, and that's why we're here today. That said, let's bring our guest on. Here we go. Today's guest is an American guitarist, singer, and songwriter, best known as the founding member of the noise rock band Sonic Youth. He has also participated in many, many, many solo and group collaborations outside of that band, as well as running the Ecstatic Peace record label. Here today to celebrate his book, Sonic Life, a Memoir, please welcome, coming at us from New York City, Mr. Thurston Moore. Hey, man.
Hey.
Hey, hail.
Hail, career pukers.
Yeah, right. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, Drew. Congratulations. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I was trying to think, what was the first guest on show number 1?
The first guest was.
You don't remember the first guest?
It was a couple. It was a couple of guests. It was a couple of guests, and then right away I had like Lou from Sick of It All and Roger from Agnostic Front. But what's interesting is I literally started it the first day of the pandemic. Right, I started the show and we started doing a couple a week, and at first I was really confused because I was like, wait a second, these numbers can't be right. Like this many people cannot be watching this show. But it was the first month of the pandemic. And it really garnered a huge audience, right?
You're an entertainer. You're an entertainer.
Dan Nastasi. That's right. It was Dan Nastasi from Doggy.
Okay.
Yeah. How was your pandemic?
My pandemic. Well, that's when I wrote the book. And it gave me a chance to sort of like put a sheet over my head and just write.
Right.
And it was like, it worked out for me in that respect. But yeah, I mean, I've been living in London for about 10 years now, and I came over to visit some relatives right when the pandemic started happening, to the point where they're like, okay, you can't really fly anymore and all this kind of stuff. And I was staying at my mom's place in right after she passed away, at her place in Coral Gables, Florida. I was renting it out. I took it over and I started renting it out just through that year because I couldn't go anywhere. So me and my wife, Eva, we stayed there, and we're there for all through those months, and that's where I really got pen to paper,
Yeah.
And I already had the deal. I had the book deal, and I just wanted to write a book about music. I was just gonna write a book about like records, and gigs and stuff. And I wanted to write a book about all the significant documents, like anything that sort of the things that turn you on when you're a kid and you kind of decide that, okay, that's the vocation I want to dedicate myself to, and that's what I wanted to write about. I wanted to write about the first time hearing Horses by Patti Smith, or to the point where a couple of years later, just, finding that that's the world I wanted to be part of, and moving to New York and stuff. So I just wanted to write about all those experiences without writing a sort of a memoir, Did you do
it like the old did you
on a typewriter?
Yeah, well, not on a typewriter, but nowadays, like on my MacBook, I'm starting to get into the groove of just dictating into it, and then proofreading it, because it's such a stream of thought. I could just go blah 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 blah. Yeah, and then
I thought about that. I thought about making it really meta, where it could go anywhere and everywhere, like like a quote unquote experimental like book. But I knew that would be a bit of a hard sell.
Yeah,
and also for my own sort of like anal retention, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make it super chronologic. I'm gonna get all the data right. I'm gonna have all the receipts, with the flyers and the advertisements in whatever local newspapers or whatever. So I went to the library. Libraries were actually closed for the first few months of my writing, so I had to really rely on my own archives, which I have, and I kind of went through them all, and I was able to sort of create a chronological archival kind of, trajectory. But so when the libraries first opened, I needed to find like microfilm of the Village Voice, because the Village Voice sort of has, like, as a cultural newspaper,
Of course.
in New York City, it's sort of like, it has all the info, like every date, every gig, just about, not everything is in there. So, you talk about like New York hardcore, it's just like, all the hardcore gigs are not in the Village Voice. And I remember
Is this when you sent me a bunch of stuff? Is this stuff
Yeah.
from the micro? Was this
That's
from the
right. Yeah,
microfilm?
that's exactly it. Yeah. I
I
sent you a bunch of
fantastic.
stuff that, like, like early.
It was great. I loved it. It
This
was
one
great.
here, like if you look at CBGB, like that first Wednesday, it says the Arcadians, the Same, and the Stickmen. The Arcadians was the first name before Sonic Youth.
Oh, wow.
And we did a couple of gigs as the Arcadians. So it's me, Kim, the drummer from my first band in the 70s. The band was called the Coachmen. His name was Dave Key. It still is Dave Key, as far as I know. And this keyboard player, this girl named Ann DeMarinis. And that's who we were. And I decided on calling ourselves I came up with the name the Arcadians, because it was kind of a Greek name for the people who were not the Spartans, who were like the war people, but the Arcadians were the people who used art and music to communicate. Like they were the peace people. Kind of a hippie name. But I thought, that's a cool name, but it didn't stick. And but that was one of the first gigs. We maybe had a CBGB audition night before that, possibly. But that's a cool page, because you see like the Bad Brains playing, and this is like early 81, maybe.
I dated it. You know what one of the many things I love about you sending this to me is, like, I just trip out, having grown up in New York City and come up here, just sort of tripping out on some of these clubs like Snafu that just you're like, wow, like, what was that?
Snafu. I played Snafu, I think, a couple of times. It was hard to play, and never play Hurrah. That was too big.
Oh, it's not that is dated. What you sent me is dated January 1981.
81, yeah, because that's right when we first started gigging. It was like that. So Arcadians before Sonic Youth. Sonic Youth becomes Sonic Youth like probably around May.
Right.
And I've actually found the listing for the very first time Sonic Youth played under that name in the Village Voice archives, and it was on that page in the Village Voice that was like for $2 and less, and so it was all the things that you could go to for $2 or less, and it was usually poetry readings or dance recitals, but every once in a while there'd be some like music thing as well, and usually like really weirdo experimental music stuff. And sure enough, there it was. It was like Club 57. Like, it was like a poetry night, featuring Sonic Youth. And I was like, that was the first time we would have used that name. And I found it, and I was able to get the exact date from my book. But
this is another one of those pages, but just to point out, like, just tripping out on like the old dance Satyria lineup, with like, somebody, Conk and Los Microwaves and stuff like that, like bands that were just,
and some of them you see like Madonna opening up for somebody. Like she's just she's like a downtown kid, like trying to find gigs. Stimulators.
Yep.
Yeah, CBGB with like Crawford Stimulators with Crawford McCoy. So there's not really like a new hardcore scene yet. Like the Stimulators are kind of in their own world. Because I remember seeing those guys like at Tier 3 and like, they're still playing like kind of like straight ahead punk rock. I thought nobody was really doing that anymore at that point, but they were, and I was like, that's kind of interesting.
Let's set the table a little bit. Like, how did you come up? Did you grow up in a musical household? How did music come into your life, and what were your early influences?
Yeah, I was always in the house. My father was a music guy. He played classical piano, and he taught music appreciation courses like in the university and stuff. And like during World War II, he was like a band leader in the Navy. So he never saw action. He never went over. They kept him here just so he was saved himself from having to go into the pit. But Yeah. So there was always music in the house, certainly because of him. And then I have a brother who's 5 years older than I am. And so I'm 66, he's like 70, 71.
Mm-hmm.
In the 60s, he was the guy who brought home Louie Louie, by the Kingsmen in 63, 64, whatever. And just like all of a sudden hearing that and just thinking like, okay, that's the coolest thing ever. And just like, I mean, all those records coming in the house once in a while, like you find out about the Beatles from Kids Next Door and stuff like that. So to me, it was always about like wanting to be in a rock band eventually, to the point where you're just kind of like walking around like with a tennis racket and playing the tennis racket as a guitar. Like, okay, well, this is as close as it gets. And then I was given a acoustic guitar by my grandmother, and I started trying to play that, but I had to take lessons, and I didn't really want to take lessons doing anything, but I went to a guitar class with a bunch of other kids, and they were all kind of like sat around, and the teacher was trying to teach us how to play Kumbaya.
Mm-hmm.
And I already had put like an STP, like racing oil sticker on my acoustic, and everybody looked at that like, what's like, that's wrong. I was like, what are you talking about? But I was already had my eye on kind of like wanting to be in bands like that were not playing Kumbaya.
Right.
And I saw some, I think the first time when I was 9, 10 years old, we drove up to Connecticut for my father got a new gig teaching at Western Connecticut State College in Danbury, Connecticut. So I became a New England kid. Now, we were in Florida before that.
Mm.
And he was teaching at University of Miami. But
I love the bit in the book when your brother had all his quote unquote hippie friends, and they each had a band of their own. And it so reminded me of, growing where like each one of my friends, like that's the guy, that's like the Rush guy. And that's
totally.
Yeah. And your brother's band was the Jefferson Airplane.
Yeah. For whatever reason, he chose Jefferson Airplane. So he bought their records, and they were in the house. I was like, okay, Jefferson Airplane. And yeah, I mean, those records, when you look at them, like Bless His Pointed Little Head album, or
love that record.
Volunteers. Yeah. I mean,
I love that record.
At the time, it was just like, it was like San Francisco, like, LSD and like good vibes. And I was like in an ice storm in Connecticut. So I was like, this is not really translating.
But I did see that one of the first records that one of your very first records, and I wanted to ask you, like, what was the first music that you felt was yours? Was Captain Beefheart, Clear Spot, which is
kind of a lot of it was defined by economy, man, because you don't have any money as a kid, and I really wanted to buy records, but they were like $3-4, and I couldn't afford that. I had to sort of ask my mother to buy me my first album, and I was just like, remember being a kid and like in the Woolworths or whatever, and I chose their Satanic Majesty's Request, the Rolling Stones record.
Okay,
because they had a 3D cover, and they're like, it's really cool. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, and then we were standing in line. She's like, well, who is it? And I was looking at the record, and I was like, I thought maybe it was the Rolling Stones, but I wasn't quite sure, because like the script on the back was like so weird, and I was just looking at it. And I was like, it's this really good band. I don't know. And but it was the Rolling Stones, obviously. And I used to play that record to death because it was my record, right. That was my album. And so I really learned that album. And it used to scare me because I would play it in the middle of the night sometimes. And there's like a crying baby at the beginning of Gompers or one of those tracks on the record. And that became like my Rolling Stones record. And then later on, you would read about critical evaluations of Rolling Stones. And that was always looked upon as like kind of their worst record, or
even Bill Wyman sings a song on it.
Yeah,
it's a weird friggin' record, right?
You're kind of trying to copy the Beatles moves on it, and there's just like, but I think it's a brilliant record to this day. It's like, to me, it's like it has like these kind of classic tunes on it, like She's a Rainbow. Come on, and so I love that record.
Yeah,
In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly was the other one. That was like the first album that I had, and so I used to play In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida like relentlessly. But I don't really return to that one so much. But
that was my first too.
In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida.
Yeah.
Or In the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
I was 11 years old. I did the Ron Bushy drum solo at a talent show.
Oh,
when I was
man.
in school.
Yeah, I mean that whole, it's like the fact that there was a track that was a sidelong track was just like, you know, astonishing. Even though they weren't the only ones who did that, but they're the only ones I knew about at that time that did that.
Yeah.
You know.
What was the first live music that you saw as a young person that you got out there in front of and like, wow, like people are doing it?
Yeah. When I was a little kid, I was at the Orange Bowl parade in Florida, and one of the floats went by, and the Supremes were on the top of it, and I was like, "Wow, this is, you know, it's an actual like famous group," and it was those girls, you know, singing, and I was just like staring at it, going like, "That is the coolest thing in the world." And then right behind him was a float with like this TV actor named Lauren Green, and he was like
Mutual
saying,
of Omaha.
I was like, "Lauren Green, whoa, I've seen my future." The Lauren Green of noise.
Yeah.
The actually first gig I would have seen. I mean, I saw some sort of like bands. There was like a garage rock band in Connecticut called the Boss Blues, and they had like a late '60s 7-inch called So Go, and it's a nugget. Like you'll find it on comps, like garage rock comps, and they were local, and I saw them play in a parking lot of a grocery store in Bethel, Connecticut. And I was just like, okay, that's cool. This is like a real band. And later they became like a really kind of notorious sort of like hippie commune band called Cro-Mag. And you know, not Cro-Mags, but Cro-Mag.
Right.
Like
Right.
this is like early 70s, and they had a record on ESP disc, which was like kind of the weirdo kind of like free jazz and
Going deep.
Yeah, going deep.
Yeah.
And they had an album on that label, and it's this really rarefied weirdo record from Connecticut, Cro-Mag. And years later, like not too long ago, my brother tells me he's working at this electronics firm that he works at. He's retired now, and one of the guys was in that band, the Boss Blues and Cro-Mag, that he was like, and he became really good friends with. He's no longer with us, that guy, but he became one of my brother's best friends all these years later. And so I searched for an original copy of the ESP disc record, and I gave it to my brother for Christmas once, and he got it signed and stuff.
Wow. Who tell us, you in this photo, you as a very young person, tell us who's with you in this photo and kind of how he comes into play in your musical journey.
He's super significant to me. His name was Harold Paris, and he was in Bethel High School with me. And he was kind of a really effeminate, kind of swishy kid in the hallways, you know, with like a shirt unbuttoned and like a tie, like, you know, hanging, and he reeked of cologne, and I knew he was kind of next level, you know, but he like the early 70s high school, like in any kind of you know, rural suburban world, man, if you're going to be if you're going to be acting gay in high school, you're going to be asking for trouble. And he was a young gay kid, and he wasn't really out of the closet, but he was obviously of that persuasion. But I remember overhearing him in the hallway talking about like things that I was interested in. Like, you know, he went to see the Diamond Dogs tour of David Bowie. He was talking about Jane Fonda and Barbarella and all these things. And I was like, my ears pricked up because none of the other kids were talking about that. They were talking about Bachman Turner Overdrive and all this stuff I liked, but I was really kind of into this other stuff on the margins that was like a little, that had this this kind of smart vibe to it, and it was like really interesting and glam and glittery. And I immediately went towards stuff like that, Bowie, Kiss, whatever. I was just like, okay, I'm really interested in that. And this kid was like obviously also interested in that. And he came up to me one day and he said, Patti Smith is playing at the Westport County Playhouse in Westport, Connecticut. And this is early 76. And I graduate that spring from high school in 76. And he's a year younger. He's a junior. And he comes up to me and he kind of notices me in school because he sees me carrying Cream magazine around and Circus magazine and these rock magazines. Sure. And I'm the only kid in school that has these magazines. Everybody else has Hot Rod magazine. You know, I like Hot Rod magazine too, but I also like these rock mags. And he says, yeah, Patti Smith is playing in Westport. I was like, are you kidding me? When? And he's like, tonight. I said, we got to go, you know. And it was before Horses came out. She was in just before Horses came out. and we corralled this one kid we knew who had a car, and we said like, take us to Westport. It's like 45-minute drive from Bethel, like down like winding like rural like streets. And we went like 90 miles per hour, like whipping towards Westport Playhouse, nearly killing ourselves. And we get there. There's tickets. We get in. Tickets are like $8 or whatever. And we get in. And it was like one of the greatest gigs I ever saw. It's like Patty came out like with the band, and she had like a leather jacket on, motorcycle jacket, and she kind of like took it off and like swung it over her head and threw it on the drum riser, and then they just belted into like, we're gonna have a real cool time together by the Velvet Underground, just a total garage rock version. And I was like, oh yeah, this is it, And I saw some crummy gigs before that. I saw Rick Wakeman. I saw I saw Frampton and Jay Giles.
Sure.
Zappa, these things were happening at like New Haven Coliseum, and we would go, and I would go up there, and we'd like be smoking joints and like sitting in the seats and just like watching this like arena rock gig. And I was always excited by it, but at the same time, I never left like transcended. I never left like thinking like, wow, that was like life changing. This gig, Patti Smith gig, her group, I left there thinking like that's what I want to do.
You and Harold started making excursions into the city, right? Eventually you built up to it. And I must say, anybody out there, check out the book. It's great. It's thick. It's detailed. This guy has a penchant for detail, man. Really, but you start doing, I love how you, and I related to this because I grew up in the Bronx, but we would come down on these like musical excursions, into the, let's go to the Village. And we would just wander around the Village and just like follow the breadcrumbs, to go to Poster Mat on 8th Street and go to this and go to that. And just, kind of our way around. It seems like, I mean, I don't know how early on this is, but, you were around for this, right? The Damned?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, that was exciting. They were like, they were
the first.
They were like the first English band to come over. I think Eddie and the Hot Rods might have come over and played at Max's, but Eddie and the Hot Rods were like, more like a revivalist rock band in like the context of punk in a way. And you kind of knew that a little bit. And plus, Max's was a little more grown up, and the CBGB's was a little more fun. Max's would change. I think when hardcore bands started playing at Max's, it became more of a playpen. But before that, it was a little more grown up, kind of Warhol crowd. And but the Damned at CBGB's was big, and I remember that was a have to gig for sure. There was a Damned and the Dead Boys.
And I wanted to ask about the Dead Boys. In my notes, Dead Boys, were they as great as legend would have it?
Yeah, Dead Boys were incredible.
Yeah,
I saw them. So we went to see the Dead Boys because I had read about the Dead Boys somewhere where it was like the singer Steve Baders is the guy who gave Iggy the peanut butter at the Cincinnati Rock Festival.
That's all you needed to hear.
Yeah, and then they do actually, and they they kind of like they're kind of like following in the footsteps of the Stooges, and they do covers of like Mott the Hoople songs like Death Will Be Your Santa Claus. And I was like, all that sounded good to me. And they're playing at they played at Max's Kansas City, and they were playing with this band from Detroit called Sirius Trickson and the Motor City Bad Boys. And Sirius Trickson and the drummer of Sirius Trickson, the Motor City Bad Boys, was the drummer from the MC5. And so that was interesting. And I had already seen that band a couple of times. I really wanted to see this band, the Dead Boys, from Ohio. And so yeah, we went to that. And at first we had already seen Suicide at Max's, and Suicide to the nearly, they were coming. There was Alan Vega like on your table, like breaking glass and like just really being this incredibly entertaining threat. And so for the Dead Boys, I heard that maybe they kind of do the same thing where they attack the audience. And I said, well, let's sit back a little further, So we sat like, at the end of one of those banquet tables that was in front of the stage at Max's. Tiny place,
Yeah.
And like, So they came out and they still had long hair, like Cheetah Chrome and Stiv still had kind of long hair, and they were good, but they didn't really do anything like I felt scared of. And sure enough, they did do the Mott the Hoople song. They did Search and Destroy, and then at the end of the set, like two bouncers had to drag Stiv off the stage, like he was like draped in their arms as if he had just like drank 5 bottles of whiskey or something like that. And I think that was a bit of a bit of a shtick.
Yeah.
like I'm totally wasted to the point where I have to be dragged off the stage, But they were good. And then they moved to New York, cut their hair. Hilly Crystal at CBGB, yeah, they look like that. Started managing.
I do.
CBGBs every weekend almost.
I do have a shot. Just as a reference,
That's
I think
a great shot.
This is worth noting. This is a shot of Frankenstein, which is
yeah. So that's what they looked like when I first saw them.
Right. That's why
they had long hair. They weren't dressed like that so much, but they and I don't know about that dude playing bass in the back. I don't remember him being.
Yeah.
But yeah. They just became phenomenal. They were the band for everybody downtown New York who wanted to go to CBGBs and see like punk rock just blow the roof off the place. The Dead Boys delivered it in spades. I mean, they were just killing it. All their songs were good, All This and More and Sonic Reducer. I mean, they were just like great songs. They never really the album they recorded never really matched what they did live. Genya Ravan produced their first album, and it's what it was, but it just didn't have the je ne sais quoi of what they were doing.
Didn't Felix Pappalardi produce their second record?
Something like that, yeah.
Oh,
weird choice. They're
what
like,
were they thinking?
I have no idea. Super weird choices, but I think a lot of it has to do with like record label people going like, oh, well, this is a really good producer, or even like possibly Hilly Crystal saying like, yeah, this is a really good, legendary producer. And
this guy was in Mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and to their credit, those guys came out of that scene anyway. It's like, the fact that punk rock was happening, it was happening. They were defining it just then. They were, them and the Ramones. I mean, the Dead Boys Ramones nights at CBGBs were just amazing. Dead Boys Dictators nights, just amazing, And so you'd go there, and it was just like all night long. It was really rowdy, And these guys would come out, and they would just be this like blood and spit on stage. Stiv would be like sticking a vibrator down his pants and jerking off in the middle of his guitar solo. I mean, it's like, what the fuck, It's just like it was theater, but it was all about having a good time, having fun. He would drag somebody dancing in the front of the stage. He would like drag them on stage, and he would like rip their clothes off, and he would like pour like peanut butter all over their body and lick it off. And you've seen like the footage that you see on CBGB with like he has like bologna like safety pin to his shirt, and then he like blows his nose in it, and then he like picks it up and eats it. It's like, come on, man.
I licensed that footage for the Michael Alago film. That was Rod Swenson.
Yeah,
that was his footage. I licensed that for the Alago film, and I licensed that moment where he takes the bologna, blows his nose, and eats.
Yeah, man, totally.
Yeah,
I remember like one of those. I remember like the first year anniversary of the Dead Boys at CBGB's gig. That gig, they pulled out all the stops, and they did. It was demented, and I remember at the end of it. Cheetah took his guitar off and he threw it down on the stage, and the band just stomped off, and he was standing there, and he started spitting at his guitar, like like flipping the bird at his guitar, like, yeah, fuck you, and like I was just like, whoa, this is not it. And then some guy had come up to the stage, and Stiv had on a crucifix, like a real like rosary bead crucifix. And the guy was incensed, and he was pointing up at him. He's like, take off that crucifix. Take off that crucifix. He thought like Cheetah was a demon, like wearing the. He thought it was this totally sacrilegious, like. And I remember watching that as a Catholic kid, just sitting there like, yeah, this is not working out for this guy tonight. He's in the wrong place.
Hey, Joel, you got anything for Thurston on these early Halcyon days?
I want to kind of move in a slightly different direction, because one thing that your book represents fabulously is all these different personalities that were floating around New York at the time. Number one, I love the fact that you mentioned Rommelzy, in the book. I mean,
See,
talk about an interesting character. But one I wanted to bring up, because I know he's critical to the early days with Sonic Youth, and I have a podcast myself, and I just had Glenn Branca's wife, Reg, on.
yeah, Reg Bloor.
Yeah, who she's playing tonight with Norman Westberg and Gabriel's actually. So
Yeah, it's cool.
yeah, she's great. And
You say she's what? She's playing?
she's playing tonight with Norman Westberg
Where?
and Reeves Gabriel's.
Where?
Somewhere in the city. The name escapes me, but it's tonight. And
In Manhattan.
yeah, and Reeves' drummer is, I think it's Brooklyn actually, but Reeves' drummer tonight is Jonathan Cain.
Oh,
yeah.
I want to go to that. Man, I hope I have to do this thing in 92nd Street later tonight. I miss, like Jesse's Mallon's benefit thing is tonight, which I wanted to go to, but I have to deal with my own BS.
Yeah, but I definitely wanted to mention Glenn, because obviously Glenn was present in the early days. Your first appearance on an album was a Glenn Branca project, Just Another Asshole. And I got into this quite a bit with Reg, obviously, that I haven't heard all of Glenn's stuff. I've heard quite a bit of it, because there is quite a bit of it, obviously. He always struck me as somebody who had more up here than ever made it onto record.
Oh yeah, totally.
So, how would you describe sort of his process and what he was actually kind of take from here and commit to vinyl or to the stage?
He was like, he had these radical ideas of what like electric guitar can do, like in the context of playing, amplified music, and he comes out he was in an experimental theater troupe in Boston in the early mid 70s. And he came to Manhattan because he wanted to get involved with that scene in Manhattan, which already existed around this guy, Richard Foreman at St. Mark's Church on the Bowery, who had his theater troupe there. And a lot of people, when they came to New York to do more research into like the professions they're into or the disciplines they're into, whether it was art or dance or theater or whatever, they saw that all the energy that everybody was like focused on was happening in punk rock at CBGB's and Max's and stuff. And so that's, artists were starting bands and like trying to express themselves through playing music that didn't have anything to do with traditional technique of rock music, but it was like, it had its own new voice in a way. So that's what made everything so kind of exciting. And the fact that like Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers playing like a really sort of like traditional sort of like, sped up boogie punk rock kind of music on the same stage as like the Talking Heads, who were kind of creating something else entirely, coming out of like, art school and having these other ideas of what a song structure could be. The fact that they could work together and sort of create this dynamic that's what people like Glenn or myself or whatever coming to New York, that's where we went to, because that's where all that energy was. And Glenn went to, he went to these clubs and he saw the Ramones and he saw the Dead Boys and he saw Suicide. And he was just like, that's how I want to express myself, because that's theater. Stiv Bader's, doing what he's doing, Alan Vega doing what he's doing. Even like the way the Ramones presented themselves was kind of like, it was like it sort of had this kind of high it's really this heightened performative thing. It was like, okay, we're all going to be brothers with the same last name and wear leather jackets and sort of funny t-shirts, and ripped jeans and ripped sneakers. It was like a look, and they sort of, it was a high concept. It wasn't just like four guys like getting together and rocking out. It was four guys with a total very concepted way of how to present themselves. We're not going to play any leads. When I first heard like other punk rock, because I heard the Ramones really early on, and I figured, okay, that's the template. And I was just like, this is fantastic, man. They've taken away, like, I don't have to be a lead guitarist because I can't play lead guitar. I can't play real guitar, but I can play a bar chord and I can play it like that guy on stage with the Ramones. And that music is so incredible. And I was like, okay, that's it. I want to be like that. So when I first heard like other punk rock records, like even like when the first Damned record came out, and I went to Cutler's record store in New Haven, and the guy had put on the sleeve of the Damned record, he put like England's Ramones, and I was like, okay, yeah, cool. And hearing lead guitar on New Rose, just a bit, Brian James, he's shredding, but it's what it is. It's still kind of a lead line. And I was like, no, it's verboten. You're not supposed to play lead guitar on punk rock records. But of course, the record was so fantastic. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's you can play a little bit, But that's just how it was. But so Glenn sort of, for him, he was just like, okay, I could do whatever I want to do on guitar. I don't have to, certainly don't have to follow the traditional technique of like Hendrix or Clapton or Jimmy Page or whatever like that. I can sort of be as powerful as what I'm hearing with Suicide and Ramones, and I'll do my own thing. And he started like just experimenting with the guitar. And he also experimenting with volume. Is like, well, if I play this at the same volume that the Ramones are playing, like what would that sound like? If I put like all high E strings on this one guitar and tune them to all that high E, and you play that kind of like mass high E soprano guitar going to an amp cranked to 10, that sounds like nothing else in the world. So how would if I create a band that sort of like deals with those kind of ideas? And those first bands he had in the late 70s, Theoretical Girls, and then The Static, before he started just doing things under his own name. That's what he was doing. And I remember seeing that thing. I saw Theoretical Girls and Static, and I just thought they were just part of the whole milieu of like weirdo bands downtown. Like, anything went. And it was just like, and I thought they were cool. I thought they were just kind of like rugged and noisy and just like effed up, but it wasn't like I thought like, well, I want to be in a band like Theoretical Girls or Static or anything like or even like seeing Contortions or Teenage Jesus and the Jerks or whatever, the no wave bands. I never thought like I kind of want to be in a band like that. I wanted to be in a band like I was hearing in my head that was coming out of like, Ramones style punk rock with kind of experimental ideas, something a little more sort of, I couldn't categorize it. And then I saw Glenn play under his own name at this little space on Broome Street called A's. It was like a performance space. Lots of different things happened at, and I lived nearby, and I went upstairs and he played, and it was like 6 guitars, bass and drums and instrumental, and just loud as loud as and they just started, getting into these like long, sort of like 15-minute kind of like just raging, like an airplane taking off guitar thing. And he had his back to the audience, and he was like cueing the other guitarists, like, and he was just like, like rocking out like he was like, like he was in like a punk band or something. And everybody was just staring at him, like making the moves, and they were like all just kind of like single finger kind of moves on the guitar, like, but they, and I was just like, what? This sounds exactly what I've been like thinking about in my head, like, who is this guy? And like, how's he accomplishing this? And so I started like paying attention to him and going to more gigs. And then when I met Kim, she knew him already. Like, Kim was involved with the scene around that he was in. There was this other guitar player, Reese Chatham, a composer who was like a flute composer who moved to guitar after seeing, again, punk rock at CBGB's. And he's like, okay, I'm going to use a guitar and I'm going to do this stuff. So punk rock radicalized these kind of like these artists and these composer guys. And I got involved with that milieu of people. I just started, I thought it was really interesting. I tried out for Glenn, took an ad out in the Soho Weekly News. He said, looking for weird guitarists playing in weird tunings. I was like, well, I am a weird guitarist, but I don't know if the tunings are weird. They're just like different, And I went to his apartment on 8 Spring Street between, Bowery and Elizabeth. And,
right in the thick of it.
Yeah, right in the thick of it, right there. And so Donnie Fury's studio.
Yeah.
So we would rehearse in Donnie Fury's studio.
Is that right?
Yeah, totally. Glenn rehearsed down there. So we'd have like 1,000 guitar players down in Donnie Fury's studio. And Donnie was like doing the demos for Glenn and stuff like that. And Donnie had his own band, the Donnie Fury band.
Yeah.
And he put a record out called Pop Rocks. Remember that? And that's where all the first hardcore records were being made.
So wait, here I have the visual. Are you ready for the visual? I actually have this visual. Boom.
Oh yeah, that's it. So there's you go down to the pit in Donnie's Spring Street studio. Yeah, totally, man. So Glenn lived at 8 Spring Street. The Donnie's place was just a couple of buildings down. And so that's where we all, Sonic Youth, when we first got together, we rehearsed at Donnie's. You know,
Is that right?
yeah. That was a rehearsal spot. And then I started hearing about bands actually cutting records with Donnie,
Yeah.
which I thought was like, oh, that's kind of, that's good for Donnie. You know, he's actually making records. Then I heard, later on I heard that like, oh, he did a lot of the hardcore sessions down there.
Well, he did the Agnostic Front stuff. He's up in upstate New York. He bought a building in upstate New York and has like a great space now for his studio. Yeah, he's in I'm drawing a blank of upstate New York.
He's in Troy. Isn't he?
Troy.
Oh, that's cool. That's good to know. I like Donnie. He's a good dude, man.
So that sort of inspires this, right?
Yeah. So this band would have been rehearsing down in Donnie's for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, the other rehearsal spot was a basement on Grand Street that Bradley Field, the drummer of Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, had, and we rehearsed there as well.
Was it Sukasa down on Avenue A?
There was that place. I remember that place. Yeah, we went maybe there a couple of times. Yeah,
the place was grimy. Oof.
That was a grimy place for sure. Yeah. You had to sort of like jump when the rat ran across the room.
Yeah. Let me ask one. We're talking about sort of these early days when things were coming together. Any unsung heroes from those early days? Anyone who you just thought was absolutely fantastic and was such a big part of it, but for whatever the reason, didn't really get over the hill?
That's or get there. Question. I don't know. I mean, there were definitely some people that I thought were really interesting on the scene who didn't stick around, and I always wondered what happened to them. Yeah, I mean, but as far as like unsung bands, I don't know. I would have to sort of dig a little bit. I don't know if we.
How about the Fast? Did you see the Fast?
Yeah, well, the Fast were kind of like the perennial like downtown New York band that was around since like 73, 74. So there's that whole scene before punk started being used as a word, mostly because of Punk Magazine or whatever. Yeah. And Lester Bangs and everybody kind of Lenny Kaye using it like on Garage Rock, talking about like the old bands like the Sonics and stuff like that. But it started that word started coming in. Even before punk, there was like a thing about New York downtown music where they were calling it raunchy rock. Like I actually have a fanzine from 75. It's called Raunchy Rock Fanzine, and the cover is like Wayne County, and and so that scene that sort of predates punk in a way, like 73 onwards. I don't think anybody really has a name for it. And some people are calling it raunchy rock or like New York rock or whatever. Right. Yes, the Fast in Wayne County and the Planets, the Heartbreakers, but the Dolls, and then the Heartbreakers coming out of that. Early Television, early Patty,
sort of like that vacuum that was created
Blonde,
there.
Early Ramones, the Blondie was called like Angel and the Snake, at first, and they used to play more at a club in Midtown called Mothers.
Funny, you know what? You sent that to me, right here. Yeah. I out of everything you sent me, this is one of the things that I grabbed because this is sort of like talk about unsung heroes. This is like an unsung venue. Yeah. Mothers,
like the Fast, Blondie, Ramones, Blondie, Planets, Meek DeVille, and that was a bit of a gay club on 23rd Street that allowed these bands to play. It's the guy who was booking it, who was responsible for booking Max's Kansas City afterwards, and he brought
is that Peter? Is that Peter Crowley?
Peter Crowley. So Peter Crowley goes over to Max's, and the guy who runs Max's wants it to be a disco because disco music is huge. And Peter is like, it's not going to work, it's not his thing. But these bands are his friends and his thing, and he's managing Wayne County. And he's like, well, let me book Wayne County and all those guys, and see what happens. Right. And people start showing up at Max's, and all of a sudden Max's becomes like this reborn place. But before that, it was kind of like, it was just a showcase place, like early Bruce Springsteen gig or whatever, but it became like a punk mecca next to CBGB's, which was really cool because those two places couldn't be more different. You know, they weren't that far from each other, and there was always this trek that you go to Max's, you'd see the Fast or the Planets, and then you'd walk over to CBGB's and see the Dead Boys, and you know, in one night. And so it took like 20 minutes to get to one place or the other on foot.
And you know, it was kind of a weird one, and I don't know if we'll get to it because I know you've played this place. Is I want to get the here we go, get the visual on this. And this one's sort of, and it's still, the building is still sitting there because we do our Bowery Electric stuff, and it's right next door. This sort of weird spot.
Gildersleeves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
well, Gildersleeves was kind of the hair metal place. And it
Is
was
that
kind
right?
of, yeah. Well, in the 70s, because it was like literally like a couple blocks from CB's, and so you would pass Gildersleeves, and that's where bands like the Brats were playing there all the time. It was bands that sort of still were coming out of like 70s kind of glam and glitter rock, and lots of like bands from the boroughs like Long Island, Brooklyn, Bronx, and Queens, bands that had shag hairdos and played their version of T-Rex and Kiss kind of fusion, really glammy bands, not like straight up punk rock or weirdo experimental stuff. That wasn't happening there at all. But every once in a while, they would let that in there. I remember playing one of the first Sonic Youth gigs was supporting Glenn's ensemble, and this was before Lee was in the band. And it was me and Kim and Rich. I don't even think we had a drummer. And it was Ann DeMarinis, and we just and Glenn let us play. And this no wave artist named Boris Police Band did this noise gig. He was great, and we played at Great Gildersleeves. So it was kind of like a Great Gildersleeves would let you in there if you kind of if you booked it, but it was primarily a place for glammy hair metal guys.
Hey, Paul Kastabi, what's up, man? Thanks for stopping by.
Hey, hold on 1 second. 1 second, fellas.
Yeah.
Paul Kastabi just showed up. I just happen to have within arm's reach a flexi disc from 1991. It's got the Reverb Motherfuckers, Youth Gone Mad, Rats of Unusual Size, and Pigpen. So
yeah, there you go, man.
Yeah,
you just happen to have that like lying next to you right there.
literally, because I'm
crazy.
reorganizing my apartment. I just happen to have my flexis right here.
That's funny. I did notice, Thurston, in some of the stuff you sent me when you were playing an Even Worse.
Yeah.
Did you guys play with Minor Threat?
That's Gildersleeves.
Oh, excuse me, at Gildersleeves. Yeah.
That's Gildersleeves. So Gildersleeves,
Yeah.
when Gildersleeves never really had any like kind of like first generation punk rock gigs, but they did start having hardcore gigs.
Yeah, I saw.
And so like when I like 82 onwards, and so you would see like amazing hardcore gigs. There's a bigger.
I saw the
room.
Misfits.
Yeah. It was a bigger room, and so it was like.
Go.
And so that gig is even worse, opening up for Minor Threat and Cause for Alarm.
Yeah.
And I think it was like the first Cause for Alarm gig or something. Cause for Alarm were kind of a bit of a super group.
Yeah.
All you guys, like all you NYHC guys, like, okay, Cause for Alarm is like the big, it was like, I remember like, I didn't know you guys because I was a little older and stuff. And so for me being in your, like infiltrating your scene as an enthusiast, I was alone.
Yeah.
And it was Jack Rabbit, who kind of got me into playing, him and Timmy Summer. And so Timmy Summer had his radio show on WNYU called Noise the Show, where him and Jack Rabbit would sit there and Timmy would just scream everything, the announcements, the back.
You playing through that? Is you playing through that acoustic head?
Yeah, that was my brother's acoustic head, that I eventually blew up. And,
there you go. That thing, that thing wasn't long for this world.
No, that eventually it eventually smoked.
Yeah, those things couldn't make it through the battle, man.
But I became friends with Jack Rabbit because I like this. I would buy his fanzine and stuff. And
here's a shot of Jack. Jack's in this shot with you right here from that same show.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
We weren't even worse. This is sort of like stage 3 or 4 of Even Worse,
Right.
So Jack had been, the band had broken up, and then Jack put it together again with a new singer and Kenny, and then, and then asking me to play second guitar, there was another guitar player too, this dude, and then we did a few gigs. I don't know. I enjoyed it, playing Last Night's Blimpie with those guys, and but Jack was so well respected on the scene, and so people gave us the time of day. It wasn't like Even Worse was a new band. Even Worse was like one of the first. Stimulators, Even Worse, the Awfuls, like those bands. And I was kind of in Kraut to some degree, and certainly Heart Attack and the Undead, and I was kind of older, and I was kind of interested in what was happening. But I was more interested in what I was hearing coming off of like Discord, the first Discord 7 inches, and certainly like the Misfits 7 inches, and then all of a sudden you realize that there was this scene of people like a half generation younger than me.
You were at this show?
I wasn't. I wasn't at that show. I wish I was at that show.
Yeah, I was at this show. This was bananas. This show.
I would have given them anything to be at. I think we were like on tour. There's a bunch of shows like that in New York where I'm just like, man, why wasn't I there? I was like, you were on tour. You couldn't be there.
You know what? One place I wanted to ask you about. I guess this is a little before, but I do want to touch on this. I was at this show, and this was at a venue called the Mud Club. And this was Black Flag at the Mud Club. Yeah. I was at this show. This is a venue we don't talk about too much on this show. It doesn't come into play much, but it does play heavy in early Sonic Youth. Yeah. And give us some Mud Club perspective and what it meant to you, and some Black Flag perspective.
I mean, Mud Club, anybody and everybody could play at Mud Club. I mean, it was basically. It was on way downtown below Canal Street on White Street. And when it first opened, it was originally called the Molotov Cocktail Lounge. And it was opened up by this woman, Anya Phillips, who was like this Asian American dominatrix woman who was managing the contortions. And she was like James Chance's girlfriend, and her best friend was Lydia Lunch, and all this kind of stuff of like this no wave thing. And Anya Phillips was really interesting because she was around in the early 70s scene around Mothers and the Fast and all that kind of stuff. There's pictures of Anya Phillips that I've found where she's wearing like a big Fast button on the front of her clothes. And so she opened this club with this guy Diego Cortez, who was a downtown mover and shaker, and he was managing, quote unquote, managing Teenage Jesus and the Jerks and some no wave stuff. And he put on that infamous big art show in Queens that where people first saw Jean-Michel Basquiat art and stuff like that. So these people were already clued in to this kind of downtown dynamic, and they were all hanging out at Max's and CB's and stuff. They opened their own club on White Street, and they called it Molotov Cocktail Lounge. They changed it to Mud Club because it was some kind of inside joke about Dr. Mud or whatever. Yeah, there's Anya. And she's no longer with us, but she was a terror. She was like really important on the scene at that time. And so they opened this place, and they were inspired to open it by this club that was in Chicago at the time. I forget the name of it. And that was and Diego Cortez had gone to Chicago art school, and their idea was to create this kind of space where people could hang out that wasn't CBGB's or Max's. And it immediately became a sensation. If you lived downtown and you were sort of part of the scene, you started going there. And then they started implementing the velvet rope thing. It's like, there's too many people. Are you look like you don't look like you belong here kind of thing, which was like kind of bullshit. But it created this exclusivity kind of elitism of like downtown no wave punk rock. And that's why that song Egg Raid on Mojo exists on the first Beastie Boys record.
That's right.
Because Mojo was this dude who was
a doorman.
Yeah, he was a doorman at Mud Club. And he was also, Mojo was this dude who was at a lot of the hardcore shows. And he was a rather heavyset guy. Do you remember him? And
yeah.
When Mojo would stage dive,
yeah,
CBGB's, it was like, yeah, everybody get out of the way, because he didn't want to get flattened by Mojo. He was like a big dude. And so all of a sudden Mojo kind of leaves the hardcore world and is like, I'm more into art rock. And then he goes to Mud Club and becomes a doorman. But he also becomes a performer. He was playing in he played with White House, the most like notorious noise assault group from London had come over, and their whole thing was just like, the high volume, you could slice it with a knife, and they played at Mud Club, and
Yeah.
they enlisted Mojo to be like on stage with them playing noise. Mojo, I don't know what happened to that guy, but he was infamous.
Troy Praddock says, how about that White House show at Mud Club? Madonna threw her drink in W.M. Bennett's face. Mojo was on stage.
Mojo was on stage. Supposedly Madonna was there. She could very well have been. I remember being there. There wasn't that many people in that room. I just remember Michael Board walking around just like laughing his head off because it was so loud that you couldn't even think. And it would stand to reason that Madonna would be there because people hung out there. And so maybe after that performance, which was so freaking brutal, she went up to William Bennett and threw her drink in his face and said, like, the worst shit I've ever heard in my life, which is the greatest review you're ever going to get, right? From Madonna. It was quite an eventful night. But yeah, Mojo got the Beastie Boys kind of wanted to go see something. Who knows? Dead Kennedys were probably playing or whatever. And he wouldn't let them in. I'm not going to let you little rapscallions into this like sophisticated Mud Club place. Go home. And they went home and they got some eggs and they came back and they ate and they threw eggs at Mojo.
And they egg raid on Mojo.
So there you go. But it was a cool place. I mean, it was definitely like cooler than cool, but people kind of knew each other. Like if I went there, I would recognize somebody at the door that kind of had eye contact with, and he'd see me around for the last couple of years. Like, okay, yeah, you can come in.
He's all right.
But they would have punk shows, and I remember seeing DOA there, and like Joey Shithead was at the door with a clicker, clicking the amount of people coming in because he didn't trust like the pay, at the end of the night. And I was just like, you could sort of override the Velvet Rope thing and take it down and like, okay, let in your friends, because there were hardcore shows. A Heart Attack and Misguided and Undead played there.
It's all at my fingertips. Boom.
Yeah, there it is. That's the gig.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the show. And then Sluts from New York, who weren't like the best punk band, but they were on bills for some reason. Greg Ginn really liked them. He took them on tour with Black Flag.
Is that right?
Yeah, 12 Inches of Sluts was the name of their album. I remember them playing with Black Flag and Nig Heist at my father's place in Long Island.
Well, was that the Minor Threat show?
I think it was Black Flag, Minor Threat. And I think Sluts were on the bill. They were on one of those bills at my father's place. The Black Flag Minor Threat show was at my father's place was legendary. That was that was a show. That's the first time I saw Minor Threat. Yeah. And I so wanted to see that band, and they were kind of
there you go, Sluts. Yeah, they're on this bill. Yeah.
Yeah. And Nig Heist, but that's not with Minor Threat though, is it?
No.
Yeah. There was the Black Flag Minor Threat show at my father's place was another show entirely. I think maybe Saccharine Trust was also playing because they brought them along with them.
Greg Ginn is a guitar player. Did he speak to you musically?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Completely, because it's the way he just sort of shredded on the guitar, like almost like freestyle, free improvisation playing. But he was like, falling into these chords. He was like just like so distinct and unique. He was unlike any other guitar player, whether it's punk or art rock or whatever. That I kind of recognize that as like that's kind of what I want to be. I want to be my own thing. I want to like create my own voice here, and that's what Greg was doing. And but he was he was really obsessed with guitar. Like when you would hang out with Greg Ginn, he'd be waking up and sitting playing guitar all day long. Then you go to the gig and he'd play in the opening band, which was Gone or something.
Yeah,
and
right.
And then he'd like come back on stage with Flag and play for 2 hours. Right. And then he would like be in the dressing room afterwards playing guitar. Like he was just like that. He was constantly in it. Whereas for me, I was just like, okay, I put the guitar down and I go out record shopping and book shopping. I have other things on my mind besides just playing guitar. I mean, I like it, but not that much. But so Greg is, he was phenomenal. And so there's that period, that period with Flag where he was just like, when you would see him, you would just be like, it would be mind blowing.
Yeah,
You know, it was like
absolutely.
no thing. It's, you
Was
know,
this?
those gigs when he'd come out and do Life of Pain, you know, like down, 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 down. I mean that the, you know, and then just the skank action on stage during that part was just like insane. You know, it was just, you know, for me it was just like, again, I was like kind of a little bit older. I was like Greg's age, you know. So when I met
Yeah.
Greg, when SST signed Sonic Youth, I was just like, oh, okay. I can actually sort of talk to these guys who are like my age, like him and Dukowski,
Yeah.
you know, because there was those two guys, and then there was like people. Well, you're like a couple of years younger than me, but
Yeah.
you know, like people like Rollins and Ian and that those guys, and a lot of people in the hardcore scene. I mean, they were younger than me, and
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I was caught in between like people older than me who were like like the art rock guys that I was working with. I was always the youngest guy in the room, you know. So when I started playing with Glenn Branca and starting Sonic Youth, and even being with Lee and Kim, you know, Kim's 5 years older and Lee is 3 years older. I was always the youngest guy in the room, and I was kind of looked upon as like I was a bit junior, you know, within that world. And then when hardcore started coming up, I got really I really got into what was happening with it, mostly because I thought the songs were good. It had nothing to do with. I like the camaraderie of it as well. I was like, I wish I could sort of be hanging out with these people, but at the same time, it wasn't like I was, you know, dying for friendships or anything like that. But I liked the songs. I thought nobody's ever really talked about that in hardcore so much. It's always about all this other stuff around it. Of, you know, it's like, to me, the songwriting was key. So I mean, when you first buy In My Eyes by Minor Threat and put that record on at that time when it first came out, that's a song. That's just like, whoa, that's a really incredibly well written and performed song. And there were so many of them that from that scene that I liked. So that's what drew me into it more than anything.
You know, I think that me being around then and seeing you at some shows, because you're a tall guy, so you sort of can't be. So I always chalked it up as he lives in the neighborhood kind of thing.
I did live in the neighborhood.
Like the guy, he's part of it. He's like a neighborhood guy. You know?
Yeah, but he's kind of checking it out.
Yeah,
I mean, some people kind of knew I was in a band called Sonic Youth, but it didn't really matter. It was like my band was like on the margins of that scene. It was like we were part of something else. I mean, you were like talking earlier, like you were like you kept saying soft. I mean, that was such a New York term, you know, like, hey, Mr. Softy, here comes Mr. Soft. Like I even when Saccharine Trust opened up for Black Flag at my father's place, I remember some kids in the front like soft. You know, like, it's Saccharine Trust. That's not soft. That's like
and that was like the ultimate painful. Like that was crushing. Like to someone call your band soft was just,
forget about it. I remember like when Jodie Foster's Army played at CBGB, I ran into Vinny Stigma on the street, and I mean we started talking. We kind of like would talk once in a while. And I was like, "Did you see JFA at CB's?" He's like, "Yeah, they were kind of soft." And I was just like, "Come on, JFA was soft."
Well,
like,
it comes from Bad Brains. It comes from Bad Brains where they go, be like, yo, did you see Black Flag? How were they? And they were like, hard.
Yeah.
Hard. And that was like,
yeah, if it was hard, it was hard. Yeah.
Let me ask you.
That was a weird scene for me because I was so immersed in like downtown New York music. And then those New York bands like Heart Attack and Kraut and even worse. And I just sort of like, I knew they were New York bands, but there was something else going on. Like they weren't up until that point in the early 80s, like bands really were like in New York it was kind of a Manhattan thing.
Yeah.
You know, bands came from New York City, came from Manhattan. So all of a sudden there was an influx of new New York bands or young kids who were really coming out of pure like punk aesthetic. And it had nothing to do with Talking Heads. It had nothing to do with television. It had nothing to do with Patti Smith. It had everything to do with like the first Dead Kennedys album. It had a lot to do with like UK subs and stuff like that. And relating to like what was happening in DC and Detroit. Certainly the California like scene around the Germs and the Black Flag, etc. And
Did you
what
ever
I
go to
realized is
A7?
a lot of these bands they didn't come from Manhattan. They came from like Queens. They came from Brooklyn. They came from Staten Island. They came from Jersey. And I was like, oh, that's a big, big change. That's a big change because it's not these kind of pseudo intellectual Manhattan art rock freaks. This is like, these are kids coming from the burbs and around and coming into New York. And that's the new New York music. And it's hardcore, NYHC. I was just like, that's really cool. And I was just like trying to tell. I brought Glenn Branca to a couple of like hardcore gigs, and he was just like, "Nah, it's too push button. Like they know how to make. They push a button and everybody runs." I was like, "You're not getting it, man. You're not getting it."
Yeah.
You know, I was just like, "God Is Dead" is like one of the greatest like songs. I mean, like, come on, give me a break.
Did you ever go to A7?
Yeah. I played at A7 with Even Worse, and yeah, I went to A7 a couple of times.
Did you see?
I remember that room like being total A7 hardcore room. And
did you see Iggy there?
I
Iggy got up there once.
didn't see Iggy there. I saw Iggy at the Pyramid, just
Oh.
hanging out. Like when Nirvana played the Pyramid, and they played the worst gig they ever played, and Iggy was there watching it.
Got it.
Nirvana
Was this-
played at Maxwell's, and they were amazing.
Right.
You know, this one Chad was the drummer, and they had the
Sure.
Garden dude playing guitar as well, and they were amazing. And then they played Pyramid, and they terrible. It was like because they were breaking up. I mean, that the guitar guy would like got on a plane the next day and went back to Seattle, and they were just fighting and stuff.
Joel, you got anything?
A few things. Number one, that show I mentioned with Reg and Norman, that's tonight at TVI. That's where that's
TVI in Brooklyn.
Yes, Brooklyn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brooklyn. Nice place.
Maybe if I'm out in time and back here, man, I'd totally go to that. It probably not gonna start. That usually starts around 10ish anyway.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, it's going to be a good show. I wish I was there. Just to address something real quick in the comments, somebody keeps saying I look like Gary Meskel from Crumbsuckers. Let me just state for the record, Billy Milano beat you by 7 years making that comparison. So
Okay.
you're late to the party on that. You know, we were talking about those bands that, you know, were in the scene that maybe didn't kind of break to that next level and maybe deserve a second listen. I do want to give a shout out to a mutual friend of ours who I know is watching. Hello, Victor Poisontet.
Oh yeah, Radar.
Yeah, I want to bring up those guys because they were
great.
monstrous. Yeah.
So there, in the mid '80s, you know, we kind of had our gang. It was like Sonic Youth, Swans, Radar, and then Live Skull was part of that. Certainly Lydia, whatever Lydia Lunch was doing was kind of part of that. And then she brought in this whole connection to like really radical music from other places like Ein Stars in the Neubauten or the Birthday Party or whatever. So that was like our milieu, Fetus, you know, Jim Fetus coming into town. And it coexisted with like what was happening on the hardcore scene. I think I was the only person amongst that whole scene that was like really into like hardcore. And I would take Michael Girard to see hardcore gigs, and he was like, "Nah, he already had lived through the Germs. He was a hugest Germs fan, like when he lived in LA. He already lived through this. He loved Black Flag. When I took him to see Black Flag, he thought Henry was like completely the real deal, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's good." And so he would go see Black Flag readily. But I played Lydia when I started playing music with Lydia and one of her bands. She wanted to play really slow, droned out kind of swamp rock music. And I was like, check out this band. I played her Black Flag and she listened to it. She's like, turn it off. It's too fast. It's too fast. And I was like, God forbid I play you Minor Threat, you know, but so everybody, even in my band, Lee and Kim, they all knew I was really super into this. So I would go to all the matinee shows and stuff like that. But I knew that I wasn't like, you know, I wasn't really that connected. I wasn't going to like, I did cut my hair really, really short for a while, thinking I can at least do that. But I was never a skinhead. I wasn't, you know, the thing that whole scene sort of morphed kind of interestingly, like around 80, 81. I remember the first time I saw somebody on St. Mark's Place near Sounds record store. And it was a young kid, leather jacket, SSD control written on the back, totally bald. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? Like with this, like this, that's a whole new vibe. And I knew that I kept seeing more and more of that. And I knew that it was associated with like what was happening at A7 and Rat Cage. And so I started going to Rat Cage, and I knew, and I kind of sort of knew those guys. Rat Cage had a connection with Florida, and coming out of Miami, the whole open record scene. Rat Cage came out of, Dave
Parsons.
Dave Parsons,
Mhm.
and he came out of Boca Raton. He had a fanzine called Mouth of the Rat, because
Yep.
Boca Raton is the rat, and that fanzine was Mouth of the Rat from Boca Raton. Then he kind of cruised up to New York, but he went through Virginia. He was in Virginia for a while, and he was kind of part of this little bit of a scene there. And people like Richard Kern, the weirdo filmmaker who came to New York and was in the Black Snakes and bands like that, there was this connection to that as well. And it was all very local neighborhood stuff. People got into their own thing, I just happen to think those bands, I thought hardcore bands were great because everything about it to me was just like incredible. The fact that it had an audience of peers that were reacting to the music in such a way where it blurred the boundaries between the performance and the actual, the connection that they had with the audience, with the pit and the stage diving. I just thought that happened. That has never happened before, and it was completely a new thing.
It was an exciting time.
Even though the music was built on sort of traditional aspects of punk or rock, it was also about like immediacy. It's like, okay, these 4 chords really do what we have to do. It was really Spartan. It was emotional music that was on the sleeve, man. It was just like, it was great. And it was a true alternative to being like, a douchebag in a Mustang with a beer can, So it's just like good. I wish I had that at 16. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
All I had was douchebags and Mustangs with beer cans. I didn't have hardcore when I was 17.
Was this Sonic Youth's first show? Was it Mud Club?
No, our first show. Oh, that was an early show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the first.
Right.
I don't think Section 25 actually made it over. I have a very blurry memory of what that would have been. Because Section 25 were an English kind of new wave, rough trade kind of group, and they had a 7-inch out or whatever, and we got put on that bill. I would go around with cassettes of the band. I would go to every club, and I would just say, is there any night available? And I would do that all day and every day.
Right.
And very rarely would I get any attention, but Mud Club kind of would let me play once in a while,
And Joel, you pointed. Explain what's going on here, Joel.
41 years ago today, for the first time.
Bob Burt put this on his social media today.
Yeah, it's where I got it from. Hello, Bob.
He was there.
Yeah.
That was a very heavy gig because it was the first time we went over to Europe, and we played in front of nobody everywhere across Europe, and then we had one more gig, and it was in London, and that was going to be like our big London show. And we were opening for SBK of all people, like this industrial. And I had seen SBK play at CBGB's. They came over from Australia, and they would like show like the hospital evisceration films behind them, and they would wear war paint on their faces, and they were just banging on metal, like really tribal, like industrial noise music. And we were just like, so we would go see them when they were in New York, and just thinking like, wow, this is really insane, And so they were kind of legendary in that respect. Lo and behold, when we play with them in London, they had decided to change their sound to a little more of a kind of a metal dance sound. And
Boy.
So it had some synthesizers in there, like, and I was just like, okay, that's going to be an interesting gig. And we went on, and Danielle Dax was kind of she had a bit of a hit record in London, at least at that point. And she was really glammy and had poofy hair, and she was kind of a sensation at that point. And she was supposed to go on first, but the fact that she was doing well, she said, well, I'm going on second. And we said, no, we're going on second. We just broke ass getting over here from like wherever, like Belgium or whatever. No money, starving, freezing, sitting in this dressing room and being told by this woman is like, no, I'm going on second. You guys are going out first. And we argued, and she won. And the promoters sided with her, at least, let's put it that way. And so we went on first. And we went out and we had this like insanely like fucked up gig where Lee's amp blew up on stage and smoke was coming out of it. And I was just like smashing the guitar with a microphone. And we got through like 3 or 4 songs. And then they started closing the curtain. And I was beating on the curtain with the guitar. Like, it was like, it was just making this loud thump through my amp, like boom, boom. And the people that were there for the first band were like hardly any. And they were all back by the bar. Nobody up in front except for 2 kids were up in front leaning against the stage looking up at us like with wide eyes going like, yeah, it's fucking brilliant. Oh my God. As the curtains were closing, I was like, well, at least we have 2 people who
hey, that's all it takes.
That's all it takes, man.
Hey, let me take a sponsor break. I know Thurston, you got a lot going on. You're doing an event tonight. We got to cut you loose in a half hour. Let me take a quick sponsor break, and we'll come back and we'll start to field some questions from around the world. All right. So you got like 3 or 4 minutes if you want to step off for a second.
Sounds good.
Okay. See you in a minute. Joel, I'll see you in a minute. This is the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live. Our guest today on our 350th landmark episode is Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth. We're going to do some promo stuff, and we're going to get to those questions. We're going to bang them out. We have them for another half hour. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is a great one. Since 1992, Generation Records has been a mainstay of the New York metropolitan area music scene. Today, they offer a diverse selection of new and used rock, jazz, indie, hip-hop, punk, hardcore, metal, blues, soundtrack, and reggae LPs, as well as t-shirts, posters, and other merchandise. They buy used record collections and music memorabilia and will pay you top dollar for them. House calls made for large collections in the tri-state area. Call or email generationrecords@gmail.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
Will that be cash or in debt?
Do you mean debit?
Yes. Sorry. Another eternally satisfied customer.
Yo, what's happening? I'm out here at one of our all-ages Sunday matinees on the Bowery. I hope that you are enjoying today's show. I just want to let you know that the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live needs your support. Please step up. There is a Patreon page that has a lot of unique program. Shows are announced there first. Lots of good stuff. There's a PayPal address right there on the screen if you want to make a contribution. There's also a super chat function. You could do that, but the bottom line is this show exists because of your support. We're going to be doing it for a long, long time. Thank you for all your support through the years. Back to the show.
Conditioned by indoctrination, conditioned by society. You're a victim of the digital age, a 21st century casualty. Open your eyes, you're losing control. Open your eyes, put down the phone. Conditioned by misinformation, it's just the media telling us lies. Decipher fiction from the truth, society's slow and tragic demise. Open your eyes, you're losing control. Open your eyes, put down the phone. Everyone's got their phone.
And we're back. This is the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live landmark 350th episode. Want to quickly mention some upcoming shows. Carl Agell coming up from Corrosion of Conformity. Next, there will not be a show. There will not be a show on Sunday. I'm going up to Bridge 9 to moderate the Vinny Stigma Roger Moret book event on Saturday. And then Sunday, I'm moderating the Roger Moret book event, speaking of Agnostic Front, at Generation Records. A couple days after that, on Wednesday, December 11th, Carl from Corrosion of Conformity, Legions of Doom, etc., will be on the show. A couple days after that, Brian Slagle from Metal Blade on December 15th. Renee Mata on December 18th. West Beach of the Plasmatics. Come on now. Coming up on Sunday, December 29th. Looking forward to Matt Henson and Noise. We're playing a show with them in New York City on Sunday, January 12th. We're going to do some Delta Bravo with Jimmy Ferrari on Wednesday, January 15th. And this just announced the other day, the creators of Punk Rock Bowling, the brothers Sean Stern and Mark Stern from Youth Brigade are coming up on Sunday, February 2nd. Hey, I just want to mention also the show needs your support. Please support the show. There's a Patreon page. There's a PayPal address. Also, I see that somebody just did James Batista just did a super chat function. Hey, if you do a super chat function, put a question to it. I can't miss it. You come right to the front of the line. That said, if you have any questions for our guest, Thurston Moore, please post it now. We have him for another 25 minutes. Let's go deep. Let's get weird. Listen, we know we could go on for a couple hours with Thurston. He's got a couple other things going on. So let's spend our time wisely. All right. And please, if you can, join Patreon. That's the best way to support this show. We're going to be going at it for many years to come, and we could use your support. That said, let's clear the deck. I know. A couple people have posted questions earlier in the show. Please post them again, so they're right there, and I don't have to go looking for them. That said, let me bring on our co-host. Hey, man, Joe.
Hey.
And like you said, we could go on for 5 hours with Thurston Moore, man. He's really fantastic, and I'm really, really enjoying it. So let's bring Thurston back on. Hey, man. Let me adjust. Let me put everybody back where they need to. Yes, hey, speaking, Jamie from SSD Control. Yeah, a great show so far, you guys. Digging your stories, Thurston. I'll see you this weekend, Drew. Yeah, I'll see you up for the book signing event. Yeah.
The only time I saw SSD was a CBGB show, and
was that the Bad Brain show?
It might have been, yeah. I just remember I really wanted to see them a lot, and because I thought Kids Will Have Your Say was great. I mean, I thought other albums were great, and and I was really big enthusiast. But I saw them at CBGB's, and I always remember that show because Al jumped so high in the air, and he landed like on his just like on his bottom, and you could hear the thump.
It was powerful.
The voice and the drums and everything in that room. You heard I felt the thump. I felt like it was an earthquake in the room.
I was there. It was one of the Bad Brain shows. It was a powerful moment. It was a powerful moment.
It was really. I was just like, "Whoa, is he okay?" And then I remember like looking, like you said, I'm like tall guy in the room. I was able to see, so I could I always went up against the wall at CBG because it was like that pit would get so insane.
Yeah.
That even if you were against the wall, you were getting you were getting beat up. And so you had to be careful.
You had to be on alert. You had to be on alert.
On alert. And I remember, to me, it was like really forensic, man. I would really analyze the audience, who was doing what. And you could always tell when an interloper came in, somebody who didn't belong in that pit and who was kind of acting the wrong way, they were thrashed. They were thrashed.
They were dealt with appropriately.
Dealt with appropriately. I remember just standing there going that guy's he's dead meat. I mean, he's just he might as well go home now because and then of course it was an incredible time. Because I don't think even when it got bigger and bigger and bigger with the so-called mosh pits of the world, it never had that kind of local camaraderie in a way, that you saw. It was that was just really specific to that time, And I love that footage. There's that footage online of A7 when at the first Agnostic Front kind of sort of throw together band on stage.
I played that show.
You played it, okay. That footage is really incredible because you really get a sense of what that locality was in that room of people coming together young and knowing that they were people just found each other with this kind of love for this music and just having the time of their lives, Jimmy Gestapo, who I didn't know, but Jimmy Gestapo was like, when I wasn't even worse, he was kind of really into like what was happening.
There you go. There's the flyer.
That's that show.
That's the show. I played the show. I was in the High and the Mighty. It was Agnostic Front, the High and the Mighty, Psychos, Blood. That was I played that
Psychos were.
show.
I saw a couple of Psychos gigs.
Yeah, they
Now,
were.
you talk about a band that never. You were asking earlier, like, is there anybody
Unsung heroes?
Unsung heroes. It would
Yeah.
have to be the Psychos for
Yeah.
sure. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
if my God, if the Psychos had made like that perfect record at that time,
Sure.
yeah, for sure.
Let Joel, I know you have one, but let me start. Let's field one from the audience. Thurston, you were around in New York City when punk started transitioning to hardcore music. Who do you think is the first band to make that transition? And what's your definition of hardcore music?
Well, certainly Heart Attack. I thought like Heart Attack was sort of really queuing off of what they had heard from like those first Discord records. And Bad Brains. I mean, Bad Brains was sort of like the real transitional group, because Bad Brains come in like late 70s, and that was a band that really kind of knew their way around their instruments. They're coming out of playing jazz and jazz fusion, and then like wanting to play punk rock, because like that was like a kind of music that they thought was really cool, hearing the Ramones and being in DC, and then coming up to New York. And there's somebody I was playing with like in around 79 in the band I was in, which was called the Coachman, and he's like, I saw this band called Bad Brains, and they came out. He might have seen them at CBGB's or Danceteria or whatever, and he said they just like decimated the place. They were so good. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, they're like 4 black guys from DC. And I was like, really? And then I saw 4 black guys putting up a flyer in front of CBGB's that said Bad Brains. And I went over to them. I said, are you guys the Bad Brains? And they were really like, they were just like shocked that somebody had, came up to them. And they were like, yeah. I said, I just heard that a friend of mine just said you guys were like really, really good. I'm going to go see your gig. It took me a while before I actually really got into the room to see them. And by that point, everybody was already kind of clued in, at least the hardcore scene was. I think the Bad Brains were really the band that sort of like really galvanized that world for more than anything. So I think they were like the group that sort of brought that transition in, where younger bands started coming together and knowing that they wanted to play something that approximated Pay to Come. I asked Bert Quiros, the bass player in a lot of the DC hardcore bands.
Double O and
Bert's great. And Bert lives in the UK too, and I see him once in a while, but I haven't seen him in a while. But he did that photo book, but I asked Bert. I said, "Where did that musical vocabulary come from?" It really sort of is focused like with the bass leading the song, where it's like that doon 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 doon, and then it's like that skank bass line that goes into like the high speed, the high, the like. And he said it came from us trying to play like the Bad Brains. We like would watch the Bad Brains, and we would get together, and we would try to replicate what we had seen and heard. Right. There's those guys. So those guys are super significant as a template for like at least Discord DC hardcore stuff. And you sort of like, I remember seeing a flyer for Heart Attack early on where it said like, it even said something like, like DC style hardcore.
Right.
Like in parentheses. I was like, you don't have to sort of give it away like that. But they were, when I first saw Heart Attack, I was just like, they were on a bill with a bunch of other bands like The Undead and bands that weren't really that hardcore, but were part of like the early kind of like steps of it. And Heart Attack was the only band I thought that really sort of came to the front and just like delivered what I wanted to hear from that.
Right on.
Right when God is Dead.
Has Thurston seen his Hardcore Legends card yet? Do you know you have
no, I haven't seen that. Does that exist really? Because I know there is.
Go. There it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Whoa. I look like I'm like like I look like I failed the audition for like the reunion of the New York Dolls or something. You know how
Here's,
You know how
but-
like older guys like who are playing like a lot of punk rock, they look like old ladies, you know, like that's what I feel like I look like a lot.
But the back of your card is something to behold. There's like a lot going on the back of the
Whoa.
card, you know?
Performed with White Heat, Run DMC, Smooth. What the hell is that all about?
Crush Groove.
Oh, that's DMC, dude.
Oh, I got the wrong one.
I was like, whoa, did I actually play with like, you know, Big
Where'd
Pun?
that come from? Wow. Hey, you
That was-
sent me the wrong one there, dude. That's what you get. All right, hey Joe, what do you got?
Real quick, I'll try to make this fast, but it ties everything in beautifully because, as I said to Drew at the beginning of this show, the world is very small. We're all connected in some way. So, summer of 2002, I get invited to fly out to Los Angeles to play drums for Cale Johansson from the Urinals and Trotsky Ice Pick. So, I take the gig. I go out to LA. I'm staying in Venice Beach that week. Every day I'm walking to the beach on Abbot Kinney Boulevard. Well, first I arrive in LA, I jump in my buddy's car, we drive down to Sunset and Hollywood because Sunset Junction's going on. So I get out of the car, off the plane within, however long it takes to get from LAX to Sunset Junction, we make it just in time to see Sonic Youth hit the stage. That's how I started the week. So I'm rehearsing with Cale on Abbot Kinney. Not knowing at the time, I'm walking to the beach every day, passing what used to be Radio Tokyo, which used to be run by Ethan James of Iron Butterfly. So that's where it all kind of connects. But I wanted to kind of ask you about Ethan because a lot of records came out of that little house in Venice Beach. Ethan is another one who's no longer with us, sadly. I know you did some work when Bob was still in the band, I believe, with Ethan. What can you tell me about working with Radio Tokyo and Ethan for those sessions?
I wish I could tell you more than I remember because my memory is pretty fuzzy about that. I recall going into that studio at the time because it was made available to us, and I really wanted to do something there because the Minutemen had tracked there, and to me that was just sort of like that's all I was really interested in. It was like being. I think it had something to do with our association with SST. And we had two new songs that we were playing live just then, and one was called Halloween, and the other one was called Flower. Mm-hmm. And we decided to record those two songs. And so I think we asked like where we could do it. And I think it's through SST and maybe Mike Watt versus like Ethan James and calling Ethan James up. And I knew his legacy and all that kind of stuff. And going to that studio, it was like, it was a very unpretentious room. I mean, it was just like, a place we just set up. I felt like Ethan was he didn't know us at all, and he kind of looked at us a little askance because we were kind of not typical, we weren't even like Meat Puppets or Saccharine Trust. We were like completely something else, like our guitars were all like cheap beat up guitars, and we were like laying them on the floor and like tuning them weirdly and setting up in a way where he was just like, what, who are you guys? Like, what is this? A lot of studios were like that with us when we would come in. They were like, okay, you kind of look like a rock band and you kind of have the same tools, but you're like something else is happening. And anyway, we set up and we played those songs, and those songs were like to me were like kind of my two favorite songs in the annals of Sonic Youth in a way, because they were really open-ended, and they had like they were built on like a good sort of a guitar figure that could actually just sort of expand and breathe as it kind of developed. And there was like the singing was more of like a recitation, and but they had this kind of character that I thought was really really different and really kind of spooky and kind of weird. And I was like, I kind of like this. Mm-hmm. And so those two songs were done at Ethan James' studio. And we released them as a 12, I think as a 12-inch, and then Flower Halloween 12-inch. And it's right when we got involved with like Paul Smith at Blast First Records in the UK, and things started happening in that respect. And that was kind of a really heady period. That was really interesting. We were really getting connected with more so with SST and Black Flag and Saccharin and Minuteman. And for me, SST was such the vanguard label of how it could be completely punk rock, but also experimental, and I really thought that would be a perfect place for Sonic Youth, and they would send tapes. And it wasn't until Greg called me up one day. I think it was after Joe Carducci had left the label, and Carducci had this aesthetic, I believe at the time, which was like keeping the label really seriously local, and then I think after he left, I think Greg was into sort of looking outside of those boundaries and signing bands that were from different parts of the world. And he reached out to us pretty early on. And then he reached out to Dinosaur. And then Mike Watt's label with D Boone was New Alliance. And at first we were kind of I kind of wanted to be part of New Alliance more in a way, because that seemed more fitting for us at the time. But yeah, I mean, we did we started recording for SST, and so we became a bit of a New York, LA thing through that period from like 85 onwards, until SST kind of went weird.
They do.
I've got one for you. Let me put a visual.
You have a lot
here.
of tunings that you set your
You
guitar.
have a lot of tunings that you set your guitars to. Do you have go-to tunings that you prefer when just picking up the guitar to get some ideas going?
Yeah, totally. I very rarely play in standard tuning. And I can play a G chord and a C chord and a D chord, but I am so like untutored in traditional guitar playing that I'm just like, I at this point in my 60s, I was like, forget about it. I'm never gonna this. Just not something I'm gonna do. It's like learning it's like, I'm gonna learn Italian this year. It's not gonna happen. But it's like, but I have a tuning that's like from the 6th string up. It's a C, G, D, G, C, D, C, G, D, G, C, D. And I always say, like, this is my CBGB tuning, but it's a C.
Is that a slide guitar tuning?
No, I don't know what it is.
No?
I just sort of came up with it. That low C is kind of low C, G is kind of a good droning, too low string thing where, and it can really rock out. Like, I can sort of like, I can finger it in a way where it can really create like really super stooged out rock chords on it. And I like that tuning, and I use it a lot in the last few years. That's like my go-to tuning. Yeah. But I have a couple other tunings I've been using the last couple of years in Sonic Youth. I might have gone through like a more close to a dozen. I think Lee went through more. Like, he was more into like trying. I was more into like the purity of it. Like, if I can just find one tuning I could always use. Yeah. I was like, I don't want to go through all this business of like retuning and all the time. I kind of just I like that tuning most of all. And I kind of, the last few solo records I've had, it's primarily that tuning, C, G, D, C, C, D, and it's good. It's like it's just like an open rock blues tuning. It works.
Got it. Triv 108. It sounds like you have a great love of hardcore music. Daydream Nation has a lot of parts that sound like New York hardcore for sure. Did Lee and Steve share your enthusiasm, or not really?
Well, Lee was Steve was drummer in the Crucifix, one of the most notorious hardcore bands out of Michigan.
Right.
And Lee and I took Lee to see the Crucifix play at CBGB Hardcore Matinee. Dave Insurgent jumped on stage and grabbed Doc Dart's mic and said, because people were fighting in the audience during the Crucifix gig, and they're like, "Hey, calm down, it's a party. Remember, it's a party." And Doc Dart grabbed the mic from Dave Insurgent. He's like, "No, it's not a party." Like, he was not into the crusty punk kind of thing. He was like, "Nah, it's not a party. Let them fight," And so that was a difference between Michigan and Reagan Youth, I guess. But yeah, so we went to see Crucifix because I had been pen paling with Steve Shelley, and I had ordered the Crucifix infamous demo that's never been released ever on vinyl. The one where Doc Dart is calling radio stations and complaining about his band. Yeah, there's a show tonight with a band. I can't really say their name in good conscience, but you might want to like watch out for them. Drawing attention to his band from the Cops, and then like complaining about the Cops being bonehead. Yeah, it's a great tape. It's never come out. And anyway, Steve invited me to the gig. Went to the gig. I would have gone anyway. And he was playing in some other side bands that were a little more experimental. There was one called Strange Fruit that he had a 7-inch out. It was kind of like a experimental dub kind of thing. And he was really friendly with L7, Larissa Strickland, and John Brannon from Negative Approach.
Laughing Hyenas.
And stuff. And so that was like Steve's world. And then he left Crucifix, and then one thing led to the other where he became. So Steve was always he got it. As far as like me getting into hardcore, but Steve was he kind of was leaving it behind. He was getting more into his other stuff, and he didn't. He wasn't going out and buying, like Discord records and stuff like that, like I was. And Lee was okay with it. Lee, he thought some of it was cool, and he would go to some gigs with me. He really liked Black Flag. I have a great live tape of Black Flag at Gildersleeves where Henry leaves the stage because for whatever reason, and the band is just standing up there, and the amps are on, droning just like ooh, and the audience is just standing there, and it's been a ferocious gig, and that sound coming off stage with just like Dukowski and Ginn and Dez's amps just like blowing, just droning like noise of them not touching the guitars. And I have this great live tape of that gig where you can hear Lee yelling in my ear like, "This sounds amazing. We got to write a song that sounds just like this."
That's
and
awesome.
I was like, "That's it. That's what Sonic Youth is. Sonic Youth is Black Flag not playing."
I got to say, Lee has a bit of a balance because I've heard him on Grateful Dead podcast talking about Grateful Dead. So he's like Greg Ginn. He's one of these guys that sort of took something from that world, took something from this world.
Yeah, totally. Lee. I mean, So Lee got hardcore, but it wasn't like he became like fanatical about it like I did. I was like buying every record and like going to every gig and everything like that.
Here's your card, by the way. This might make more sense.
There's my card.
Yeah, even worse.
First band, even worse. Yeah.
Right.
Jesus, I got to get one of these.
Look at all these, man.
So weird.
Wow.
I mean, some of these I don't even know like how actual they are, but Society's Ills was the only other hardcore band I was in. That was me and Des Cadena and Dave Markey and
that sounds cool.
And Mike Watt, and we covered the entire Skin, Brains, and Guts EP.
7 seconds.
7 seconds.
Awesome.
We covered the entire thing. Total. I mean, who would want a record of us doing that? So it's like we put it out, and it was my idea. It's like I want to cover that entire record because that record is genius, and like so. Des was the only one who actually sort of slept on Moss Second's floor in the Reno.
I think I'd be amiss to not ask this. Will Sonic Youth ever play as a band again?
Probably not. I know. I mean, probably not. I mean, the key word is youth. I like moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm into I'm kind of into like doing like new music in my 60s and doing whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have, but in some ways, a lot of it would be all about, making money. It's kind of it would have to be that in a way, as far as like the 4 or 5 of us getting together and sort of the camaraderie there. So it's as it's like there's some stress in the band in that regard. So it's just like it would all be about sort of cashing in, and it's like I don't want to cash in on anything.
GXS says,
I always feel like when I teach people in writing classes, music classes, like if you're going to do it for the money, just like go ahead. But if you want to do it for it has to be creative first. So.
Like GXS says, like Fugazi, never again, move forward.
Yeah. What's the point? You did it.
Yeah. Joel, you have anything? We got Thurston's got another engagement right here in my neighborhood. Anything? Yeah.
I just want to mention coming up in February is the official reissue of Hold That Tiger, one of the greatest live releases ever. Recorded 87 at the Chicago Metro, fantastic venue. That's coming out on Superior Viaduct, which is a great reissue label. They've done amazing stuff like The Sleepers and Negative Trend. So that's coming out. I do want to ask you super quick about the cover because Bob and I have talked about it. How did Bob and Julie end up on the cover of that record?
I thought it would be just like purposefully odd to sort of have those two guys on the cover. But Bob was like already out of the band. Does he play on that? No, that's Steve Shelley playing on that.
Yeah.
And so Bob was already out of the band, and he was playing in Pussy Galore, with Julie Kafritz, and that photo. I remember being given that photo, and I just thought it was like a really just cool photo of those two. And so when we were laying out the album cover, I was just like, why put a photo of people know what we look like? Why do we have to celebrate, us? It's like we made the music. And so I was like, let's put a photo of these two on there, like, because they just look badass. And it's like, they are badass, It's like Bob Burt and Julie Kafritz, like at the height of their powers. And Bob and we didn't even ask them. We just like put it on the cover. Bob said he didn't see it until he went into like Pure Platter's record store notebook, and he saw his picture on the wall on our cover. He's like, what the fuck is that?
That's great.
It's all about surprises, folks.
That's great. Last question. No, I like. What's Thurston's memories of that Neil Young Social Distortion tour they did?
Neil. I think Neil's people were looking for bands that could sort of. Neil wanted to challenge his audience, and so they were thinking of bands that would do that, and we were on the short list, and so we immediately said yes. We was like, we had to play with Neil Young. Oh yeah, how can you say no to that? And it was the same year as the first Lollapalooza. We were in, and I remember like being asked to play the first Lollapalooza, and we decided to do the Neil Young thing instead. And we didn't know what Lollapalooza was going to be like, but it turned out to be a highly successful thing. It was like, maybe we should have done that. But the opening for Neil Young is a memorable thing. It's something I'll never forget. The audiences hated us all down the line for the most part. I mean, we'd come out, and the people that were in the audiences, who sitting in the folding chairs in the arena, most of them were out getting hot dogs and Cokes, and then the ones who were sitting there just looked at like, what the hell is this? And then they would boo after every song, like, yeah, get out of here. What is this stuff? So it was that kind of, it wasn't until we had like, a general seating audience in San Francisco that all of a sudden all these people who wanted to hear us were up in front and like encouraging us. But for the most part, yeah, it was a bunch of middle fingers and booing. But I asked Neil's manager at the time, I said, who else were you considering, to be on this tour? He's like, a bunch of bands, there's this band from Germany called Einstürzen Neubauten. And they go, that would have been good. That would have been,
sure.
They said no. And I was like, that's too bad, man, because that would have been.
That would have shook him up. Real quick.
And I gave him a cassette of Bleach from Nirvana. I said, you should get these guys. Because they had to change up Social Distortion for a few gigs.
Right.
And I said, you should get these guys. They're friends of ours. They're really good. And the manager came back and he said, hey, listen to that tape of that band. They're pretty good. But we're going to get this band called Driving and Crying instead. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Have a day.
Here we go.
Real quick, Courtney said, the video for 100% had that skateboarding theme. Did any of you skate?
No.
No
I wish I
skaters.
did.
No skaters.
I'm too tall. The only tall person I ever saw successfully skate was Chris Novoselic. Like he could actually shred on a skateboard, and he was tall as me. But mostly, yeah, you got to be down. You got to be grounded. You got to have like a good sort of gravity to the earth. You got to be sorry. I'm way too. My coordination is so lame. I wanted to be a drummer, but I couldn't even do foot and hand coordination. So that's why I picked a guitar.
Thurston, I want to thank you for coming on. We had a great time together, and
Yeah, man.
yeah, I
Anytime.
feel, like we could go on, I feel like we could go on for a couple more hours.
Let's do it, man. They give, when you get to like 600 shows or so, man, give me a call.
Yeah, and somebody asked where the event is tonight. It's
right at 92nd Street Y. I don't know if you can get in or out of there. I don't know what the tickets are, whatever it is.
Yep.
It's just me talking to this Rolling Stone editor, Anthony DeCurtis, about my book.
And then you're doing it in DC with Alec, right?
And then I go down to DC next Monday, and Alec Mackay will be interviewing me about it at a place called 6th and I. Yeah. And then Atlanta the night after that. Somehow I got to bail from DC to Atlanta in like one day.
Oof.
Yeah.
And just a reminder, the book is Sonic Life, a memoir. It is purchasable on Amazon. It is a fantastic book. I enjoyed it very, very much. I highly recommend it to everybody out there.
Drew.
Yeah. Thank you, Thurston. We'll talk to you soon, man. Thank you so much.
All right. See you guys.
Right, have a good night.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Woo! Oh, we love that guy.
Oh man, I knew that was going to happen. We were going to end up with
bro. You and me. We talked about. We had all this shit planned out, and we didn't get to any of it.
You know, I'll take people behind the curtain. This morning, we've been talking all week, but you and I got together this morning. Like, what are we going to do? And we had this whole thing planned out, which promptly within the first 20 minutes went. Yeah. Which is great because that's what you want. You want an organic conversation. It certainly was that.
Yeah. And I got so many. I got to say, like, he was a great guest. And he sent me, I was talking to him a couple of days ago. I said, hey, if you have any pertinent photos or flyers, please send it to me. Yo, he sent me this huge folder of stuff. I mean, 150 things, man. And, you know, I kind of quickly scanned through them and used a couple, but there was so many great photos. Here's him and Lee early on, like when he talked about cutting his hair short, you know, like so many great photos and stuff that he sent me that we never got to, you know. So much great. Oh, you know what he saw that we didn't ask him about? He saw Crass. He saw their first show in New York City. He was at Crass's first show in New York City.
With the gynecologist, which is Glenn Branca.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, and the contortions. Yeah, look at that. Yep.
And the blessed, that's Howie Pyro.
Is that? Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice that. That's
I think those are two different shows actually on that flyer.
Wait, hold on. Let me put it back up. Wow, what a bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the blessed, gynecologist, contortions. Yeah. Wow. Let me see what else did he send me that I didn't get a chance to ask him about this. The cover of this was how he shot this. And you told me what inspired this cover?
That was inspired by the Misfits.
Right. Very cool.
That's a great album. I love that. That's my favorite Sonic Youth record. Bad Moon.
Does anybody does anybody know where this cover was shot? Let's see if anybody. I happen to know because I used to live right there, so you know. But let's see if anybody comes up with where that cover was shot. Close. Staten Island. Close. Very. It is close. That's right. Yo, Astoria Lou, of course, comes through. Long Island City. That's right. Long Island City. Close. Pre-gentrified Williamsburg, but it is Long Island City. That's the view. That's very close with Greenpoint and stuff like that. But that's Long Island City, Queens, before the gentrification. I used to live there, so I'm very familiar with that skyline. Another thing we didn't ask him about was when he played in the band with Gigi Allen.
Yes.
We didn't ask him about that.
There's just too much, man.
This guy, you know?
Yeah. And Michael Board, too, was part of that. I mentioned Michael earlier in the show.
Right.
Yeah, man. It's endless.
Yeah.
And you know, Thursday, you guys got to read the book because you know it's a 400 something page
Yeah, the
book,
book is
and you realize he could probably do 2 to 3 times that size with the knowledge and the experiences he's had, and the journalistic perspective he takes on a lot of it too, which is really interesting.
And like I said when we posted up, but he sent all this kind of stuff, which you know I'm just a fiend for this kind of stuff. You know, the old you know Village Voice pages. I mean, and like just bugging out. Like, look at this. Look at this club called Rock Away on Beach Channel Drive in Rockaway Beach.
Rat Race Choir.
You know, I mean, look at this. Leslie West and Corky Lang, the New Mountain, Rat Race Choir, Mazarin. Like, we've never even heard of Rock Away. How about that, Astoria, Lou? And, you know, Tracks, which is right in my neighborhood here. You know, love that stuff.
And the bands too, Black Flag and Perubu.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
well, yeah. Let's do a little tour of some of those bands, like Nash the Slash, the Bongos.
Yep.
The Bongos, Urban Blight, Certain Generals.
Urban Blight. That's Mackie Jason, right?
He played in them for a minute. Yep.
Yeah.
Upstairs at Max's, the Heartbreakers, Friday the 11th, Bad Brains, Beastie Boys, and the Influence. You know. How about the Mud Club? Look at this at the Mud Club on the top right. Wall of Voodoo. Right?
Brian Brain
and Antipasti. And then the next night is the show that I was at, that Black Flag show during the Christmas, couple days before Christmas in 1981. I went to that show. What happened was I was up in Boston. I went up there. I fell in with the whole Boston hardcore thing, right, in the first couple months. And it was holiday vacation. I came back to New York to visit my family, right, for the Christmas, you know, college, you know, break or whatever. I'm back in New York, you know, really high off the hardcore thing, you know, the Boston hardcore thing. And I see that Black Flag is playing this place called the Mud Club. And I borrowed my dad's car. I think, what was I, 18, 19 years old. I drove down there. I parked and went on this like pilgrimage, a solo pilgrimage. And it was scary, right? I mean, it was a scary part of town. Mud Club. I was, you know, just by myself. I went, you know, and I remember I got there at like whatever it was, midnight or whatever it was, and ended up waiting for hours to see Black Flag play. And I remember Black Flag came out and Henry Rollins was pacing back and forth before they even started playing. And Black Flag just unleashed. And I was just like, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It was great.
It's amazing too how many of the people who were there, you know, 40 plus years ago are still active.
Yeah.
What you do, Thurston, obviously, there was a lot of people in the comments who were there, you know. So, you know, as much as we say goodbye to people on a disturbingly regular basis, you know, it's nice to see people on the other side of that coin still active, still doing things, still in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jamie from SSD, who, by the way, I have to mention this Saturday up at Bridge 9, it is sold out. I'm going to see you there, right, Joel?
Oh, yeah.
Is the big Vinny Stigma, Roger Moret book event that I'm moderating. And there is a performance afterwards with Vinny Stigma, Roger Moret, Craig Silverman from Agnostic Front, Jamie Sharappa from SSD, Slapshot, and Mark McKay on drums from Slapshot. That's the performance that we've been, you know, winking to, you know, going back a couple months, but, you know, now it's all out there. But Jamie says, yeah, Black Flag played Streets in Boston a few days later. Yep. Oh, we'll see you there, Josh. Hardcore Legends Trading Cards. Yeah. Oh, Billy, you're going to be there too? Wow, the gang, a lot. I guess everybody's piling out to this thing, huh? In Beverly. Yep. That's great. Hey, Joel, you want to hang out a minute? Let me do a quick sponsor thing and let's chat some more. We'll bounce the ball back and forth some more. Give me a minute, all right? Yeah. All right, here we go. This is the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live. Landmark 350th episode. I want to thank you all so much for being a part of it. We are sponsored by Blah, and we're going to hang out. We're going to do a couple more minutes. Let's take some suggestions who you'd like to see on the show. Let's just bounce the ball back and forth a little bit. We got it good. Let's keep it for a minute. We're sponsored by Blah, 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 and the Texas Silver Rush. They're a jewelry design firm and boutique store located in the birthplace of the Texas country music scene in Fredericksburg, Texas. They specialize in working with musicians in all music genres to design and create unique one-off pieces, as well as to style them for stage, album covers, promo photos, and social media exposure. Their client list includes Rock and Roll Hall of Famers Greg Riley, Ringo Starr, and of course, Agnostic Front. Information on online sales are being taken at their Facebook and Instagram page, and of course, www.texassilverrush.com. Last but not least, come on, Mad Vintage buys, sells, and collects band shirts, primarily hardcore. The DIY operation was started and is operated by a hardcore kid who just loves collecting and eventually got into vintage clothing, specifically the realm of vintage band shirts. They're always looking to buy out collections to either keep, sell, or trade. New shirts added daily at www.madvintage.com and posted on Instagram. Dig deep into that closet of crap and reach out to them. Help me help you, Mad Vintage. Hey, we mentioned the Bridge 9 event on Saturday. Sunday, I'm back in New York City. I'm moderating the Raj Moret book event. I've been asked about this. This is open and free to everyone. Alexa Poli, come on down. Everybody come on down. This is going to be great. Come see us do it live. Hey, Holiday Warriors, come out and play. We're buying out the room in our Wicked Lady. We're doing a holiday thing. Rebelmatic, Incendiary Device, it's going to jump off tonight. Ancient Domains, featuring members of Bold and Super Touch. End of Hope, featuring Davey Gunner of Kraut and Ill Raised. Come on through. It is 21 plus. Free show at our Wicked Lady in Brooklyn on Friday, December 13th. Yo, Sunday, December 22nd, it is our annual holiday slamboree. Women of the Pit Coat Drive. Non-residents, My War, Fire is Word, Shoot the Five, and Stephen Messina's Serial Poets. Yeah, we're doing this My War thing. We're playing selections from the American Hardcore Songbook. We got a lot of guest vocalists coming up, including Pete Stahl from Scream, Ryan Brand from Ache, Davey Hooligan, so on and so forth. Like I said, it is the Women of the Pit Coat Drive. Bring down a coat. Come down and support this very important event. Yo, Sunday, January 19th at the Bowery Electric, free all-ages Sunday matinee, 1 block from CBGB, right next to the old Great Gildersleeves. Noise, ID, American Eagle Reunion, Brass Knuckle Brigade, and Tear Gas. Yo, Sunday, February 16th, another one of our free all-ages Sunday matinees. Speaking of the Misfits, The Undead featuring Bobby Steele. We're doing this one at Berlin. It's The Undead Sad Plant Star Car featuring Sab Grave from Iron Cross, The Car Bomb Parade, and No Call, No Show. Yo, back where it all began on Sunday, March 2nd, we're getting back into the old A7. It is Incendiary Device. It's going to jump off tonight. And Crazy Eddie at the old A7. So this is a 21 plus show. We finally got back in there. A very, very special show. So come on down and be a part of it. I think I covered everything. Just in case, there is no show Sunday, we'll be back with Carl Agal on Wednesday, December 11th. Let's bring Joel back on. Hey, man.
Hey.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot going on. Excited about the Bridge 9 thing, though.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be great. I mean, that's such a great space to begin with. They have so many great events there. They've really done a great job in building a community and a scene in that area. So always a pleasure getting down there. Can't wait for it. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Mark Boyd, you're 30 minutes away from Fredericksburg. Is that Fredericksburg what? You're 30 minutes away from Bridge 9? Or has Doug Holland done the show? No, Doug Holland has not done the show. I don't think Doug Holland would do the show. I don't think he has any interest in doing a show like this. Get Merle Allen.
We tried.
Did we? We tried?
Yeah.
We tried?
Yeah.
He's burnt out on talking about the same old shit.
Well, he did that big interview with Soft White Underbelly.
Uh-huh.
And I'm taking a guess here based on what Merle told me when I approached him about this. he was compensated for that conversation. So I think that set the template for future interviews with him.
Listen, you know what? We might revisit it because you know what? I'll go out of pocket to have Merle Allen on the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we should, because I was talking to him, and that's when he had his accident. That's when he was hit by the car last year.
Right.
So he may be, he may be better. I think he is well. I like Merle. Merle's a nice guy. He's an old New Hampshire guy.
Yeah.
But I think he's back in action. So maybe we should try again. Knock on his door, throw him some cash.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to spend a couple $100 to get Merle, on board. Yeah. Fredericksburg, Texas. That's what I thought. Thank you, Mark. Where are you in Texas, Mark? I get it. I get it. Hey, Tony, man, brother. Thank you, Tony. Are you going to the Jesse Malin thing? Jesse Malin's benefit is at the Beacon Theater tonight, which is a couple of blocks from my house. Get Iggy Pop. You think so? John Brandon, John Brandon and I talked to. John Brandon we will get John Brandon eventually. That'll happen. Yeah. Yep. What else? Ad Rock or Mike D? I don't think Ad Rock or Mike D would do it. I just maybe. I don't know. What else we got? Let's see. What are you working on? What are you working on literary wise?
Well, it's funny you asked that, because my plans for 2025 include actually kind of moving away from a lot of the online stuff I've been doing and refocusing on books.
Is that right?
I'm going to be 48 next year, and while that's not ancient, there's certainly more sand at the bottom of the hourglass and at the top. So I'm like, well, when was I happiest doing all this stuff? It's like, well, I was happiest when I was reading and writing books, So I'm going to dive back into that. I have some music coming out with Ted Parsons from Prong, and a few other people who, are kind of in our orbit. That's coming out next year. So I'm going to try to get away from the internet as much as I can. It's an addiction. I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Oh, I'm thoroughly addicted to it, man.
Not necessarily a healthy addiction either, especially post November 5th. And I won't get into that. So I was reading Thurston's book, and I'm like, holy shit, for $20, I had 4 nights of entertainment reading his book. I delved into someone's history in music, which I love. And I've got 5 books I want to finish on similar subjects. So what am I doing on Facebook? So you'll be seeing less of me in general, but when I do pop up, it's going to be, here's the next book, here's the next EP. That's
and you must come and co-host, a show every now and then with me, because I really love when you do these shows with me.
Oh yeah. We've been talking about guests. I saw someone mention Dukowski.
Yeah, we're working on Dukowski.
Working on that.
Hey, Scott Helland, formerly of Deep Wound and Outpatients. Hey, just a heads up, Scott. When we were talking to Thurston in the pre-show, we were talking about Outpatients and and Deep Wound, and your name came up. I told him, what you're doing these days. So yeah, listen, maybe it is time to get Jay Mascis. So you might have to help us with that. Jay would do the show. Yeah. Daryl Jennifer, we tried many times. Daryl Jennifer would not do the show. Is that right? Yo, got to shout out Joe Romini, Texas Silver Rush, watching the show live in the store. Thank you for all your support through the years, Joe. I honestly could not have done it without you. All the blessings to everybody down in Fredericksburg, Texas, at the Texas Silver Rush. Thank you so much for your support through the years. Gary Holt's been on the show. Petey Hines is MIA. Yeah, that ain't happening. Lou Barlow's a maybe. Choke has been on. We did a show with Choke. We could do Choke again one of these days. Rich Ward, that's a maybe from Fozzy. David Johansen, you think? I've actually, there's certain people that I follow on Instagram and I see they like my stuff. And David Johansen's a guy I've so many times wanted to just go just kind of breach the third wall and go, hey, man, you want to come on and do the show? Another one is Steve Stevens that plays with Billy Idol. I follow him, and I feel like, you know, guys like that would be like, he'd be like, yeah, all right, I'll do it. You know, they're kind of like, it's something different for a guy like that, you know? It's very different. Biff from Saxon. Cyndi Lauper. Yeah, sure. Scott Ian's been on the show. Pat Dubar. That's sure. You know, I've wanted to reach out to Lydon a lot, but Lydon's had some some issues. His wife passed, and I just didn't feel like it was appropriate. But I got to reach out to John. That'll happen. That'll happen. King Diamond, you think? I'd love to talk to King Diamond, you know? Oh, yeah, Stiff Little Fingers. That's a good one. You ever see Stiff Little Fingers play?
Oh, yeah. I saw them at BB King's back in, must have been 2002.
Yeah, I saw
They
that.
had Bruce Foxton from the Jam on bass back then.
Wow.
Great show.
Hey, did you see this photo? I kind of flashed it during our show, and he didn't really bite on it, but this one with him and Lydia.
Yeah, that's a cool shot.
Yeah.
It's a really cool shot.
Yeah, that's a good one. He's playing bass.
And Thurston was in Swans as well. I mean, he was
That's
he played
right.
bass the first Swan show.
That's
ever,
right. Yeah.
you know? And that's a whole weird thing too, because some of the Swans guys initially played with Madonna. Madonna had a no wave band.
Really?
Yep. I forgot what they were called, but it's people can research it. But yeah, she was fronting this no wave band back in the day.
You know, I didn't ask him about this, and I'm like, is that Jeffrey Lee Pierce?
Yeah.
It is?
No doubt.
Wow. That's Kim Gordon and Jeffrey Lee Pierce.
Yeah.
Wow. Wowee. Wow, Jeffrey Lee Pierce actually looks pretty good. That's a rare shot, you know?
Yeah, rare shot of Jeffrey in good health.
Yeah. Holy shit. You know?
Someone just said the singer from TT Quick, that's Mark Torino. Mark Torino. He's an
right?
Accept now. He's a Jersey
Oh,
guy.
yeah. Yeah, singer for TT Quick. Yeah. Yeah, he's in Accept, right? I saw TT Quick back in the day. They were great.
Yeah, that was Mark Evans from Nuclear Assault.
Yeah, I saw them. They were great. Great
Yeah.
band. They're like they were like in that sort of like Twisted Sister rat race choir, like rock, you know?
Well, you know, being an old Jersey guy, I love all that stuff. TT Quick, there was Prophet,
Yeah.
all those friggin' bands, you know. And Frank White and Alan have that big Jersey metal book where they talk
Sure.
about all that stuff. So
Hey, here's another one that he sent me that we didn't get into.
oh yeah. Wow, that must have been a noisy show.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
A lot of drone happening there.
Yeah, huh? At
God.
Danceteria. I saw the Beastie Boys at Danceteria. Like just before all that license, like just as, you know, Cookie Puss, you know. I saw Kraut there. They were great. Let's see what else. Oh, here's one that we didn't show. His band, the Coachmen, before, which predated Sonic Youth, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All very tall young men in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one guy that's a little shorter, they have him standing up on something.
Yeah. I just noticed that. That's funny.
That's funny. What about Franz from Turnstile? You know, Franz is a busy guy doing big things. I just saw they're headlining some huge outdoor festival out west. But Franz would be great, of course. I like, you know, I've interviewed Franz before. Very nice guy. Chris Mills, I've reached out to. You know what, Josh? You ask him. He's politely declined. He's one of these guys that doesn't think he has anything to talk about. You know. Oh, another thing that was in our canon was the book that he did, right?
Oh, the mixtape book.
Right.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm in transit right now. 1 second.
Okay.
It's gonna get dark for a minute. Dark and
Okay.
spooky. I'll be right with you.
All right. I'm looking for other pictures.
My battery's about to die, so I'm gonna switch rooms here.
Okay. Here, I'll run a fake. Look at this flyer that he sent me. Sonic Youth, Nihilistics, False Prophets, Misguided, Rat It, Rat R, Adrenaline OD, a benefit for the Vancouver Five. Wow. Wow. Huh. Is that right? Is Mojo in the chat now? Mojo, Thurston was asking about you.
Wow, the Mojo.
Yeah. Is that you, Mojo? Yeah, looks like is that you, Mojo? Jim Smith? Wow. He was like, whatever happened to Mojo? Yeah. Let me see. What else? Oh, here's a cool shot of him rocking that Void shirt. Look at that.
I think he was married in that.
Really?
I think so. I could be
right.
wrong, but
yep. That's pretty great. Yes. Hey, welcome, Mojo. Yeah, you came up before. We're talking about the Mud Club and all that, you know. How about interviewing some up and coming bands, like some that are booked for the Sunday Matty Barry Lecture? Have you been? Yeah, we bring in. We've had all kinds of people on. We do I do new music shows and try to incorporate young people. And yeah, man, I've got room on the boat for everybody, James. Everybody's welcome on this show, you know.
And there will be some other SST people next year if I have anything to say about it. So
yeah, for sure.
Jazz Coleman, yeah, have fun with that.
That would be tough, huh?
I've interviewed Jazz before. Have a great time, Drew. I will not be on that episode.
Yeah.
And I love
Thank you, Tony, for bringing Mojo in. Hey, Mojo, you know, maybe we should do like a Mud Club episode, because we do that. We've done an Anthrax Club and we've done like a L'Amour's. We've done Castle Heights. Maybe we should do like a Mud Club episode and like talk about the history of the Mud Club. That would be great. You know, Keith Morris, we almost had a couple times. We'll get him eventually. Greg Ginn, absolutely. You know, Waddy, you know, almost a couple of times. You know. So so be it. You know. But that said, all right. Well, 2.5 hours. It was great. Well, Mike Ness is someone I'd love to have on the show. Zappa Mud Club 80. You know, I'm a big Zappa fan, you know. So thanks, Kenny Clark. Joel, anybody you want to thank? Anybody you want to shout out?
Well, shout out to you for having me on. This was fun. You know, it was nice listening, nice participating. Shout out to Thurston, of course. You know what? This is my first opportunity to be on the show since these things have happened. So not to bring the mood down, but I do think it's important to acknowledge a couple of things that have happened in the last couple of months. Number one, rest in peace, Inger Laurie of the Nymphs, passed away last month or late October. Friend of mine, she sang in the Nymphs, one of the great bands of all time, in my opinion. She's an old Jersey punk as well. We lost her. Closer to New Jersey, New York hardcore, definitely rest in peace, BT from the Wretched Ones. Old school player going back to 77. Talked to Billy Milano, talked to Tim McMurtry, talked to any of those guys about BT. BT was ground floor. We lost him a few weeks ago as well. So I want to make sure those names are mentioned here. And, you know, if you guys are new to Inger and the Nymphs, check out that music. Check out the Wretched Ones, Headache Records from New Jersey, Midland Park, New Jersey Oi, and a lot of history of both of those people. So rest in peace.
Thank you for being part of the 350th episode. Love when you come on, and I will see you up at Bridge 9 for the big banger on Saturday.
You got it, my friend. See many of you guys there. I know Jamie's been popping up in the comments. Looking forward to seeing you play. And yeah, I'll see you all soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye,
Take
Joel.
care.
There you have it. Great. I love when Joel comes on. You know, it's really he's so can go so deep, you know, with a lot of this stuff. Thank you, Robert Smith. Robert Hogg, excuse me, Robert Smith. Maybe it's because I've been listening to the new Cure record. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Everybody else. It was great. Great 350th show. Thank you so much for supporting the show. I'm just going to ask one more time. And you know, I want to shout out everybody that did the super chat, James Batista, Josh Hurst, Courtney. Thank you so much for those super chats that you did. If you can, if you're new to the show needs your support. It's the only way to function. Also, you know, the show's looking, there's room on the boat for another sponsor. If you have something you're looking to push, long as it's not something, you know, too crazy, please reach out. We need another show sponsor. So maybe you have a business, a thing, a restaurant would be nice, a food thing, I don't know, whatever. As Vinny Stigma would say, whatever. You know, reach out. If you can join Patreon, that's the best way to support the show. There's a PayPal Jeff's there if you want to make a contribution. How about a show on roadies? That could happen. I know, right? Thank you, Scott Helen. He could have been on for another hour, but he's a busy guy, you know. Tony Praddock, thank you, buddy. I appreciate. Heggs, good to see you. Good to see you, Heggs. You know, 350 more. Probably be 350 more. I'm not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. You know, we got a lot of great. Is that Krishna Mike? All right. You were a roadie, Billy? All right. We'll do roadies. We'll do a roadie show. You know? Thank you, Daniel. It was a great show. You know? All right. Let's, yeah, you know what? We'll have him on again. Well, you could tell he was enjoying himself too. You know, it was that kind of a party. He was really enjoying himself, you know? So, all right. Thanks a lot, everybody. You know, I said it before. I'll say it again. In the short life we have, it is important to tell your loved ones that you love them. Until next time, do good things and good things will come to you.
Conditioned by indoctrination, conditioned by society. You're a victim of the digital age, a 21st century casualty. Open